look at it. They probably ain't wrong.
Right.
Which really ain't right, but whatever.
Apologize for that. We're getting back. Go ahead, Carla. Thank you.
That's close what I.
So Mr. and Mrs. Zavetta are requesting a 21-foot variance to install a 6-foot wide pier that is proposed to extend into Tavern Creek, 171 feet channelward of the mean high water line. The 28-acre property is located at 6278 Burris Road in the 5th Election District and is zoned Resource Conservation District. Piers are not to exceed 25% in the width of the waterway, the edge of the channel, or 150 feet in length, whichever is less, and MDE has approved this application. According to the applicant, the practical difficulty is caused by limited water depth and the requirement of a minimum of 2.5 feet for safe operation of the proposed boat lift. The proposed pier length will extend the pier beyond the range of subaquatic vegetation, greatly reducing impact. The applicable laws found in Article 9, Section 2.2 of the ordinance, which authorizes the Board of Appeals to grant variances of pier length so as to relieve practical difficulties or other injustices arising out of the strict application of the provisions of the ordinance. Staff and TAC comments. Piers are a common feature for waterfront properties. The proposed pier would not encroach on the channel or extend and is less than 25% of the width of the waterway. The nearest pier to this one is approximately 800 feet to the north. There are no known substantial detriments to adjacent or neighboring properties that would be created by the proposed pier. There are no known changes to the character of the neighborhood that will be caused by the variance. The variance is not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan or the critical area program. A strategy of the comprehensive plan is to encourage the protection of important aquatic resources, such as submerged aquatic vegetation, which serves as important food, nursery, and habitat for fish. The proposed length will extend the pier beyond the range of subaquatic vegetation. According to the applicant, the practical difficulty is caused by limited water depth and the requirements for safe operation of a boat lift, and the proposal has been reviewed by the Kent County Health Department, SHA, and Office of Emergency Services, and none have objections or concerns. Staff recommends sending a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Any correspondence?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Can we offer Carla's testimony into the record? Is that right? All right. Mr. Zavetta, can you raise your right hand? Hello?
Yes,
Oh, good. Is the testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
it is.
Thank you. Can you state your name and address for the record?
Richard D. Zavetta. My Pennsylvania address, Woodland, Maryland.
Wherever you get mail.
P.O. Box 761, Erwinna, Erwinna, Pennsylvania, 18920.
Thank you. What can you tell us about this application?
I tried to write a detailed narrative of the particulars in a June 4th correspondence, and quite simply, this is a home that we bought a lot 30 years ago, and I literally have worked for the past 30 years bringing it into fruition, and oftentimes my wife and kids will be down at the site without me, as my duties at work preclude frequenting it on a regular basis. And the boat lifts that are partial depths really become a severe danger item. When the lift strikes, the bottom of the lift strikes, the pulleys are free, the cables are free from the pulleys, hence backlashing, snarling, and just a reasonably unsafe condition quickly invokes. The other thing is the property is exceptionally conducive to any form of north wind activity, dramatically lessens the water level even more so. So consequently, if one is out boating for a few hours, north wind creeps in a bit, it's almost impossible to get back on the lift. So it's predominantly the shallow nature of the lift, which is exacerbated by northerly wind flows.
Okay. Any questions up here for the applicant or staff?
Let's make the letter that you
Okay. Okay, the letter you referred to is in our packet from June 4th, and that would become part of our record. Thank you.
We just had one in here a couple months ago where we granted it to extend it out to get into deeper water to accommodate the pier, the boats that are there.
One thing I think, and his testimony, his written testimony says it right, I think water depth in general is a condition of the properties, and it does change, but it's nice, I think the fact that we are trying to protect the aquatic grasses and things is really important in these, that we're not just doing it so you can keep getting water depth forever, or under the terms, but it is and hopefully a positive environmental situation where you're not churning up the subaquatic grasses too.
I can tell you that there's substantive levels of natural grasses and vegetations that honestly, each time I run a power boat through it, obviously two things are the results. One, you're winding a tremendous amount in the propeller, but as you're looking down, clearly there is substantive levels of aquatic life. My daughter is a credentialed Duke scientist that works on the Chesapeake Bay in the fisheries department, and equally has given me my layman's knowledge of the potential non-productive use of running through any of the grasses and the importance of grasses in the revitalization of the Chesapeake fisheries. So honestly, you feel like the worst person when you're watching that grass being chopped through the props. And the new location is we do a tremendous amount of canoeing and rowing shows. So I've got a real good feel, actually more of that than power boating. So the location that we picked, I specifically and strategically worked on with her, where we were assessing when were we out of natural vegetated areas. I can say that the proximity of the boat hull as depicted in that sketch clearly is free of the grasses. There's a distinct line. That extra few inches of water truly ends the grass vegetation line. So literally, I will be out of that vegetated area should the board find it in favor of authorizing this extension.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant or staff? Well, first, are there any persons online that would like to speak to this application? Hearing none, I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, I thought you had.
No more questions?
Any other questions for staff or Mr. Zabet? Go ahead.
I'll make a recommendation that we send, or make a motion that we send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals of Richard and Madeline Savetta, their property located at 6278 Burris Road in the 5th Election District. We find that the piers are a common feature for waterfront properties. The proposed pier would not encroach on a channel and is less than 25% width of the waterway, and that the nearest pier to this one is approximately 800 feet to the north on an adjacent property. There are no known substantial detriments to adjacent or neighboring properties that would be created by the proposed pier. No known change in the character of the neighborhood will be caused by the variance. The variance is not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan or the critical area program. A strategy of the comprehensive plan is to encourage the protection of important aquatic resources, such as the submerged aquatic vegetation, which serves as an important food, nursery, and habitat for fish. The proposed length will extend the pier beyond the range of the subaquatic vegetation. And according to the applicant, the practical difficulty is caused by the limited water depth and the requirement of a minimum of 2.5 feet for safe operation of a proposed boat lift. The proposed application has been reviewed by the Kent County Health Department, Maryland Department of Transit, State Highway Administration, the Kent County Office of Emergency Services. None have objections or concern. proposed pier has been authorized by the Maryland Department of Environment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion? I'll call the question. James Saunders?
Right.
Okay. Sean Jones? Paul Ruge?
Aye.
Bill Crowdy?
Aye.
Paula Reeder? Ray Strong?
Aye.
And I'll vote with the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Zapata. You'll, good luck at the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Just to add one correction, I gave you my physical Pennsylvania address. Mailing address would be P.O. Box 244, Irwina, PA 18920. That would be for physical correspondence. The other was the physical address of our farm.
Thank you. I'll make sure the staff knows that for correspondence. Thank you, sir.
I wish to thank the board for their time and their consideration of our request. So thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Our next application is Boardneck Solar LLC. This is a major site plan concept with Planning Commission review. Staff?
Chair.
Thank you.
The staff member who is working on this is not with us today, and we didn't realize that we don't have some of the materials. So can we do Delmarva first and then come back to Morganac?
If, Boardneck Solar, are you okay with that? That's fine. Thank you for your consideration today.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair.
Is Delmarva Solar ready? Thank their staff. This application is for Delmarva Power and Light of Maryland, major site plan preliminary review for 509 Morganac Road, zone commercial. Go ahead, Rob. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Tracy. I'm an associate planner with the department, and I'm going to be talking about the preliminary site plan for Delmarva Power Station in Chestertown. So they're requesting preliminary site plan approval for some reconfiguration and improvements to the existing substation that is located on Route 291. The proposed upgrades include rearranging electrical components and buildings, consolidating 4 driveways into 2, replacing an existing chain link fence with a non-conductive fence, and there are some changes to their landscaping plan. The current site is improved by electrical components and a small control building. The surrounding area is a mix of industrial uses, Gillespie, and Choptank Electrical. At the conceptual Planning Commission meeting for this project, the Planning Commission had asked that the applicant add 8 evergreen trees. The applicant has added 8 evergreen trees, but in reviewing the preliminary site plan, I noticed that they are changing some of the species of the evergreen trees, and the utilization of the shrubs is different than the proposed preliminary plan. And the code for the property zone commercial, and in the commercial zoning district, there's specific design standards for landscaping that states that the preliminary landscaping plan should at least be the same quality and quantity. And in reviewing the proposed preliminary landscaping plan, I thought that that constituted a quality and quantity change. There is a provision in the commercial zoning district for a waiver to the landscaping plan, and the applicant has made a request for a reduction of the landscaping plan, and that letter is included in your packet. Staff would recommend that the Planning Commission review the applicant's request and discuss the non-conductive panel fence, which I think will have an impact on the landscaping, but to really kind of compare that to the previous plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone have questions for Rob?
Yeah, Rob, do you know why, what their reason for changing the landscape plan was?
So, the landscaping plan, the wall has been moved up 26 feet closer to the road, and I think that there are some existing power lines that would prohibit evergreen trees from being planted. But I don't want to speak for the applicant, so I would, if the applicant would like to speak to that. But that was my interpretation of the reduction of evergreen trees.
Let's,
So,
Paul,
because they thought it would ultimately conflict with the electrical wires?
I think there are existing, when I was looking at the plan, I noticed that there are wires that go along the road. And I noticed that it looked as though they were matching up. The closer that you got to the wires, the closer the shrubs were. I haven't talked to the applicant about this, but I think
yeah, let's, Paul, that's
yeah.
good questions, but let's let the applicant maybe get here. First, let's add Rob's, Planner Tracy's testimony to the record. And then,
And the packet,
and the packet.
yeah,
Oh, okay,
the portion of your packet that applies to the subway.
okay, all right. Everyone all right for that? Okay, can the applicant come forward? Or their representative? Thank you. Could you raise your right hands? Is that either one of you legal counsel?
No.
Okay, raise your right hands. Is the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. To state your names and addresses for the record, thank you.
Ida Parrott, real estate representative for Delmarva Power, 117 East Main Street, Middletown, Delaware, 19709.
Are you in trouble, man? No.
Not that I know of.
Maybe. Sir, go ahead.
Buzzer is going off.
George Zebley, representing Duffield Associates, 5400 Limestone Road, Wilmington, Delaware, 19808.
Thank you. We'll hold a second here. Thank you.
Mr. Hickman, for
Yeah.
the record, Ryan Showalter,
Thank-
100 Northwest Street, Easton, Maryland.
Thank you, sir.
Hearing on behalf of Delmarva Power.
Okay, go ahead with your testimony, then we have some questions for you.
The fence was moved closer to the road to accommodate the different utilities within the substation. So basically, it required the fence to be moved forward, and what we did was, the landscaping was adjusted as best we could to stay within the front yard, but also be 10 foot off of the fence line itself. We maintain a 10-foot buffer so that squirrels or whatever animals don't climb the landscaping and then jump into the substation, which would obviously be a problem. And then the landscaping is dispersed throughout so that it misses the site in front up until the right-of-way is filled with underground utilities. And the landscaping has been adjusted so that nothing is conflicting with underground utilities.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
No, not at this time.
Paul?
I'd just like to add, the transmittal notes, tree size was increased, and one notable change is that by reducing the number of access points going from 4 to 2 driveways, allows us to close some of the visibility from the road.
Okay, thank you. Any questions now? Go ahead, Paul.
So the changes, am I to understand that the changes that you made are basically safety related?
Yes.
Okay. And the non-induction fencing, the change in the fencing is for the same purpose, is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
How far forward did you move the fence?
26 feet closer to the road.
26 feet closer.
It's already moved, is that
No, it is not.
right?
To be, yeah, it's proposed.
Staff may answer this. When we approved this, we specified, I think they call it with the plastic fencing in the front. We said, we allowed it on the side and rear, but we didn't want they call it perma hedge, but I think it's plastic twined into the chain.
Yeah, my understanding is that the final site plan that was approved in '21 did include some weaving of plastic that was in the
On the street side?
I believe so. I'd have to double check, but that's my recollection.
It was allowed on the 3 sides, but not on the street side.
I can double check.
Okay, well,
The fence style that's being proposed now is a solid sheet, so there's no visibility through the fence. So that will help add to that landscaping and buffer between the street and seeing into the substation.
I understand, but we
Yeah.
specifically was voted, we didn't want that perma, because it fades and blows, it's not very attractive.
No, we're not putting the perma on. The fencing itself is a solid panel.
Oh, well, they show perma in the plans.
No,
That's not permanent. That is a solid fence, but it's not,
there should be a page in there that shows the fence itself.
On this plan, we have perma hedge detail.
Yep, that should not be
All
on
right,
there.
okay.
because we haven't used
Yeah.
perma-hedge in forever.
So, okay, I see it back, page 8 of 8, there's a fence, so what is that now? It's kind of hard to read
The
it.
perma-hedge fence, that's an old plan.
That's the plan we got, I don't know.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, that's just one we had in our packet, that's all I know.
And maybe just from what we're improving from, but that was, I mean, that
Yeah,
plan
that's
is,
dated May 24.
But it's, yeah,
That's the old plan,
May 24? Well, that's just,
May of this year.
yeah, well, this, I think your preliminary, or your plan before was approved a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
yeah, 21.
Two sets of plans in the packet, a previous and a current.
Okay,
Correct.
well, okay,
Yeah.
I'm confused then, but, okay.
Yeah.
So describe the perma fencing then, please. I don't know.
It's a solid shield so that, like she said, that there's no visibility through the fence. And I do have a picture of that.
We
that
have
helps.
this thing, we don't have a, it's just a black and white, that's all.
That's what I'm saying.
Is it is it metal or?
It is metal.
Yeah.
Yes.
How much distance between the new fence and the right-of-way line? I can't see it on here. It might be on here, but I can't see it.
So you moved it 26 feet closer to the road,
That's correct.
so how much room do we have left from there to the road?
I'm going to say at least 20 feet. Because there is the fence that's there and then all the landscaping that's in front.
Page 4, I think. Page 4.
Proposing to put in cedar trees or pine trees in there? Within the 20 feet?
Yeah. American holly and evergreen trees.
Yeah, American holly and evergreen.
We're trying to limit the height because of the amount of overhead wires that are in proximity to the substation.
Hollies would be
After
better
about
suited
5
to
years,
that.
those trees grow wide enough that they'll start to
Wide enough is good. We're just, we're trying to eliminate the heights. In other words, nothing's interfering with the overhead wires.
I mean, they're gonna keep growing, so you'll just keep trimming them back. What's the height that you're gonna allow them to get to, just just below the electric lines?
No, it'll be, they keep at least 2 to 3 feet clearance underneath the electric lines.
Are they gonna keep the shape, or are they gonna look like they were hacked out after about 10 years?
I'll keep the shape, yes.
You know what I mean, because
Yeah.
you see what's done in various,
And that's the other thing, that for the spacing is so that they can grow outwards. But they will keep their, shape, but yes.
yeah, 'cause it's, I have to admit, I drove by it today when I came here, and, with what's grown and what it looks halfway decent. And now you're gonna cut half of that, you're gonna cut it in half.
But the numbers, we're moving them, so the numbers are staying the same. We're
Well, I'm
relocating.
looking at space, I was just looking at the space, and you're literally gonna make it a lot, 50% narrower, give or take a little bit, but give about 50% narrower than what it exists now. And my feeling is now it looks halfway decent. By making it narrower, you're just making just a narrower corridor. You have to move the fence that close?
Ultimately, it's an operational safety issue. And the reason is, we have to have the ability to maneuver equipment within the fence, within the substation, 360 degrees to serve equipment. You know, if this was a new parcel, the substation could be developed much further back from the road. But we're dealing with historic infrastructure and have to find a way to provide that safety and reliability.
Right.
And that's what's driving the fence.
No, I understand the safety part or whatever. It's,
And so, you know, our thinking is by going to that panel fence, which is not, it's not the perma-slats, but it's a solid
Yeah, we
panel.
just didn't get a good picture of it. What we have is a black and white screen. I don't know how it looks.
I did.
Yeah, okay. We submitted a cut sheet, but I think we have a color. We can give you a better image. of what
Yeah,
it
just-
looks like.
yeah.
That will reduce the visibility, so you won't
Right,
see all the
yeah, I
different
understand.
components.
Yeah, I understand.
And then by eliminating two entrances, even though we're compressing the landscaping, it gives us the ability to close off two of the four openings, which, you know, we think mitigates the change.
I'd rather walk up there and have this look. This is rendering.
What is the fence
What
made
it
out
looks
of
like
again?
now, because that's what it's going to be.
It's a non-conductive panel, so I don't know exactly what its
Plastic?
composition is.
Thank you.
Yeah, was it fiberglass or plastic?
It's plastic then?
I thought it was metal.
Metal framing.
Mr. Chair, it's on page 143 of the packet, but you have to slide over to see what you, if you scroll down, you'll see the existing, but that.
We didn't get that in our packet, though. We didn't, I put it up on my laptop here, but my plug's on dry. So it's plastic?
It's not conductive. I don't think I think it's metal frames. And
Right.
Have you seen?
I don't know what the material is of the fence.
It's integrally colored,
Yeah.
and it's a solid panel. I think it's more of a fiberglass or plastic resin type material.
It's all one solid color?
One solid color.
Solid color. Is it readily cleanable? And the reason I
Yes.
bring that up is, unfortunately, in today's world, there's a little bit of graffiti shows up every now and then.
It's designed for substation enclosure, so that's a typical issue around the country.
Everyone see it? If you'd seen it online, but we didn't get it in our packet.
See if I can pull it up.
Mr. Chair, given that there's a discrepancy between what you have in front of you and what's in the council packet that was published, can we just clarify that for the record, that what will be in the record is all of this information that is in the publicly distributed package?
So I guess, can we state that?
Yeah.
That the planning commission is utilizing this large plat for the discussion of this project, including the non-conductive fencing. And I hope it's attractive, but it looks pretty cheap right here. I mean, it doesn't look like what we want for the gateway to Chestertown. I mean, this landscape you did before, it failed, but you did put it back. What's there now was replaced recently. And that was actually kind of attractive for what you can do on a site like this. But that's,
And you're going to do all this work, is the work you're going to do be in conjunction with what's going to be going across the street? You know, are you going to have to tear, basically, are you going to have to tear your site up again to allow what happens?
No.
This is going to proceed. I mean, the timing that's on your agenda is coincidence more than anything else.
is this, the landscaping, we have not so formal a planting plan here, though.
So your site plan on your site plan on sheet 6.
That's it? That's it, okay. Right? Yes.
Just scroll down a little more.
Yeah.
There we go. That's the proposed.
That's the proposed fence.
And that's the site of, the way the plantings will look too?
Yes.
Yes.
That's as planted, that's not with growth.
Unless
the applicant to supply a different drawing, we believe that the drawing we're looking at is in the background. Yeah, it's.
Just a question, the plants on the screen appear to be arborvitae, but you're saying you're gonna plant hollies?
Right, there's American hollies, there's eastern red cedars.
Oh,
there-
red cedars, okay,
There are Japanese yew shrubs and winterberry shrubs,
okay.
and there is a hedge maple.
I'm not
Four hedge
familiar with the
maple.
American holly, but how high, how tall would those holly trees get? And the only reason I ask is I got some about 20, 25 feet tall in my yard. I'm just curious as to what.
We space those so that they're away from the lines, and we will make sure that they don't.
And they're nice because they stay green all year. I mean, it's a nice tree. I'm just, you know, mine I have to trim every year.
We do have them spaced so that they're, like you said, they're not underneath of the utility line, so we won't have to go through and top them and worry about the proximity to the overhead lines. But we chose those for that back row so that they would provide that additional screening.
Okay, thank you. Are there any persons online or in the public that want to speak to this application? Someone in the back, please step forward. Just, yes, you can slide over, please. Thank you. Don't leave.
You want to swear him in while you're at it?
Pardon?
You want to swear him in while you're at it?
I couldn't hear you.
Do you want to swear him in as well?
He's an attorney, that's why we, okay. Can you state your name and address?
Yes, Elizabeth Watson, 226 North Kent Street, Apartment B, Chestertown.
And your testimony is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Go ahead. Sit down, please, if you like.
And this is the microphone? Okay, I just wanted to, I'm here for the other project, obviously, and I spent a lot of time thinking about plantings lately, as you all probably have as well, with the solar project coming up. This is right across the street. The board, or the solid fence, if it is graffiti resistant and, you know, can last, is fine. I'm disappointed to see the renderings not matching the discussion here. And unless you all put absolute conditions in that say what you understand to be true today, you know, hollies, varied plantings, not the, you know, the arborvitae they're showing in the renderings, I wouldn't give them the time of day until they bring you what they're supposed to bring you, which is what you should see. So that's my testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Please step forward, sir. Name and address for the record.
John Leisinger, Kennedy-Dale.
You affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead, thank you.
I hadn't intended to speak, but when I saw the plan and tried to match the testimony about species to the plan, they said 4 or 5 different species. There are 2 shown there. Mentioned were American holly and eastern red cedar. And my research for the property across the street, in which both species appear in the plan, the American holly grows to 60 feet. So I don't know how that ties into the comments about overhead wires. And the eastern red cedar grows to 50 feet. And so I just back up Elizabeth's comment. I think they should be more specific in terms of the species they intend to plant, because there's conflict between what they've just said verbally and what's shown there. And the species that I mentioned are probably inappropriate given the space allotted after the fence is moved forward.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone else? Okay. Any more, you can come back now. Yeah, you can even get a chair.
Just to be clear.
Any comments or closing testimony before we discuss? Or-
So the rendering that you see is an image that looks at the western of the 2 entrances. And if you look at your site plan, what the site plan shows there is in that specific location, just to the right of the western entrance, the left entrance, you see there's 2 different plants called out, JV and IV. So what is shown there is a staggered row of red cedar and then winterberry holly. So that's what you see in that rendering are the two species that are at that location. If you look at the plan view of the landscape plan, which is sheet 6 of 8 of the site plan set, you can see that there are American holly and other trees interspersed. And what was explained is that this is not directly underneath of the wires. So the red cedar and the American holly, which do get taller, they're generally vertical. They're more or less vertical trees. The deciduous trees that were selected, which are more spreading trees and have the potential to have greater impact on the overhead wires, you see those are proposed as understory hedge maples. And so the rendering that's submitted is accurate. It doesn't show the entire plan. It doesn't show every species that's on the list, but it does show a rendering of the entrance. The reason we chose that view was so that you could see the landscaping as it's proposed, the entrance and the fence, and get a sense of all of it. A rendering that shows all of this with 5 years of growth wouldn't show the panel behind it. If we picked a different location, there might be more diversity, but you have a plan view that shows the location.
Can you show it again, Beth, please?
Of every species.
This is 6 of 8, that's the thing you're just referring to.
Yeah, we have that in our packet. What we don't have, unless we're online, we don't have that.
Where do the overhead lines come in on the plan on page 6?
If you see, if you go up.
It's not up.
It's not on that, but if you go on the sheet 6 that you guys were looking at in your packet, where it says Maryland Route 291 Morgan Neck Road, just to the left of that, there are three lines that go straight to the top of the page. Those are our overhead lines. The ones going at a 45-degree are overhead lines, and then there's ones, let's see, and that's it that's on this site right here.
So they're generally over the left entrance and to the left of it.
Yes.
So one of the lines, there are 3 lines coming in? 3 lines coming in?
Three lines coming in, and then 3 that are at a 45-degree angle.
And one of them is,
More or less centered on the entrance road.
but it's also in the middle of the red cedar line. Is that
No.
correct?
No.
Sure.
I just couldn't call out what those are.
Excuse me. Were you presenting this as part of your testimony? Paula, are you presenting this as part of your testimony? Okay. Excuse me. We're presenting this plat from the applicant as testimony. Why don't you come explain it? So I don't want Paula to have to testify. I appreciate it, Paula. I don't want you to explain it.
Should we have a microphone up here?
Yes.
And you can show it to us and we'll.
The lines that he highlighted in yellow are the overhead lines. These are the shrubs that are there. And here, the trees that were, let's see, AC is here. AC is here, and AC is here. I circled the 3 AC, which are going to be the taller trees, which are away from the overhead lines. And they're spaced throughout.
The cluster of plantings under those overhead lines are Japanese yews. Those are shrubs that are installed under the overhead lines. What you're seeing in the rendering is the opposite side of the driveway. So if you're coming into the substation, it's the left side of the driveway.
Basically, this view right here is if you're standing right here in this red circle in the entrance, and it's looking in this way.
Okay, thank you. I think what the trouble was, we did get this, but electronically, and it looks so much more linear, not complementing the landscaping we usually like to see. I don't know if there's room to make this same species to make it look a little less formal. We're not looking for a wall, we're looking for some informality. We asked it for the applicants down the road on the right, the other commercial places that put a variety of screening, intermittent.
Would it be better to have a picture that say, starting from across the street rather than in our driveway from across the street and shows the whole front?
Well, it'd be better to see the whole front and not just a rendering that's not, I mean, to see it, to match what we have here. We don't see any deciduous trees at all. And, you know, I think it would just give us a better profile. I understand you got a substation, you're not going to hide it, we understand that. But we'd like to minimize its impact on the gateway to Chestertown, I think. That's part of our comprehensive plan. And comments or thoughts on this one?
Well, I think we need to keep in mind the safety issues relating to the surrounding fence and not ignore those in
No, I don't
terms
think
of
we are.
meeting requirements we might suggest.
Well, I'm certainly not going to minimize the safety requirements. I think it's more how it appears. It's still, the formal outlook is less appealing to me than less. That may just be me, but that's what my thoughts.
Mr. Hickman, if there's a preference to stagger the red cedars, we thought it would be better to have 2 rows and have shrubs down lower and have the cedars behind. You know, we really don't care, but we only have a
Okay.
narrow window.
I understand.
That's-
This is just not as, I want to say, we had talked about it before. What we want, we have a conform is to make it, you know, to minimize the impact of sites like this. And I know it's a tough situation with safety concerns and what you got there. You can't hide that really, but making it a little more natural, I think, is the word I would use. But if that's a one-man's opinion there, so.
To his point, like he's saying, we can stagger those and then have the shrubs go in and out, but then the way we have it now, all the shrubs are visible from the road, so that way there's a visibility of shrubs in front and the visibility of the other ones, whereas we can stagger them, but then half the shrubs they're not going to be visible.
Well, I was more intermittent, so you're not linear, that's all, but.
Okay.
My thoughts. It's preliminary, like anyone's thoughts on it.
One thing I did see, they say that, we said to keep in mind that the caliper of a tree is measured 6 inches above grade, it's 4 foot above grade. We measure the height 6 inches. If we say a 6-foot tree, it's really 6'6" from the ground grade up, so that's the only thing
Thank you, Bill.
I think, you know, that if they came back for final with, you know, it's the same number of shrubs, just like you say, mixed in there a little more. Like I say, it's just it's a substation that's, they're gonna screen across the front. I'm assuming the sides are gonna be that poly webbing still? Is that correct?
And I apologize for that, but that's what we got in our packet, so that's the permit.
Just one more question. I hate to say it, I do disagree with Joe a little bit. I like the uniformity a little better, but again, one man's opinion versus another. But one concern I have is, because you're closer to the road, and in this area, they do use salt on the roads and whatever. How salt resistant are these plants and these plantings, these trees? Is there any feel for that? I'm not a botanist, so I can't say no, but you see what I mean? When if there is that type of weather, or they do put salt down and then you get rain, it goes up into the grass and into the trees, and it does. I know cedars don't like it.
Well, we'll respond to that as part of the final site plan and understand the question. I would say that you see red cedars throughout our landscape, including along the shoreline. I mean, red cedars are probably the most prominent, other than loblollies, evergreen that you see along the shoreline of our brackish waters.
You know, I'm just curious, because it goes to, you know, because quite honestly, I would ask for a maintenance, you know, see some kind of maintenance plan or maintenance agreement for that front to keep it looking good. But
They'll have that.
pardon?
They will have that.
Yeah, no, I'm just reiterating it, but just I would just check on some of those cedars and whatever to see how, you know, I don't know how salt resistant they are, and that is something that happens down here.
Well, that would happen to anything.
Well, that is true, but there are some that are more resistant than others. So, I'm just curious. I just don't want to see dead trees.
Well, nobody wants to see dead trees. I'll go on record with you, Paul, as agreeing with your perspective that I don't have a problem with the more uniform layout. In fact, winter berries are beautiful in mass plantings with the berries and the flowers. Could create a nice frontscape to the evergreens behind. So.
I have them in my yard, but I don't plant them in a line. All right, anyone else? Go ahead, James.
Based on what I'm looking at here, those evergreen or cedar trees, they grow how high?
I would say 40 to 60 feet, 40 to 50 feet.
Right. And they bounce together, correct? They grow and they come together. We got 60 feet of trees for our gateway, right?
Yes, yes.
Once those trees grow and get to 60 feet, and they also go this way and close up everything, it looks a mess. I know because I've seen them. I saw them around the house and where they need to be trimmed every year, and they keep going. And you telling me that this gonna be a gateway? Part of a gateway? No, it's gonna be a mess.
So one of the challenges is a balance between more immediate screening and longer-term screening. And, you know, if you asked a landscape architect how closely red cedars should be planted in the landscape to have their natural shape, they would probably tell you that you put, you know, a third or a quarter of those in there. But then you'd see the fence for a lot longer. And so there's a balance between providing screening and providing spacing for a single tree to grow to its maximum size.
Right. All right. That fence is totally an amateur fence. Go back. If you want a gateway, if you want the eyes or something, put a nice fence in there. Just don't just slap everything in there. Make it look presentable. That's all. That's because you come in here, if I come in here and want this gateway in Kent County, but you come in here with a 30% project, do the 100%. Then you can look at the gateway. It's a gateway. All right?
Can I ask a clarifying question, if I may? When we were here last time, when we presented our landscaping plan, one of the takeaways that we had was to increase the caliper and size of the plantings and to decrease the spacing to make it look fuller sooner. So that's what we did, but now what I'm hearing is that you're asking us to increase the spacing again, to go back to what we had before?
I would say I wouldn't have put the evergreens in there. If you give me a decent fence and the smaller flowers, I would eliminate that out.
One thing I would suggest for us, and we can agree to disagree on all of this, and it's, like I say, it's a tough site, but presenting this, I guess it's on your side there, is not very helpful. I mean, you've done many projects. Delmarva's got a lot of projects everywhere. And something that shows a positive project with the what do you call it, the perma hedge, or not the perma hedge, the non-conductive fencing and the trees, that would be helpful. That would be really helpful, so we didn't have this discussion, I think. I mean, we want it screened. We're not going to make everyone happy that way, but we do want it screened, and we want it to be attractive as much as you can. So, but if we've heard from everyone, we need are you okay with what? You look like you're going to ask.
No, I'm good.
You need a ruler for me. Is there any more discussion, or we want to entertain a motion for this applicant?
Like
going with the landscaping first. We got, I don't see a lot of consensus up here.
We make a motion then, I don't know. I think if we've done this before with preliminaries, make the motion with recommendations, which we've heard some, and that, like I say, whether, whoever makes the motion can recommend what they feel is best, and we'll vote.
This is not concept, this is preliminary.
So preliminary.
So
They come back.
they can come back.
But I think if we, whatever we do, if there's some issues, we should state that we'd like James is, we want it to make sure it's the gateway, whether forget the linear plantings, but the fence is that it's presented as that, whatever that is. Something, I want to see a better picture would be helpful to me. I'm not, so.
Let me ask this to the applicant. You say this fence, they come in sections? Is it possible to get a section and have you put it up against the fence that exists down there? Just so we could get an idea what it looks like? You know, a little real-time show and tell?
We can try.
We can ask, I just know that there's a lead time on delivery for,
I'm throwing out, you know, it's just.
I think a picture of a project that has done it, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, that
I think
would be helpful.
what we have is kind of inefficient, insufficient.
Me personally, I'd like to see the real thing, but I'll go with
But a photograph.
the consensus.
will work.
Yeah, I think a photograph.
All right.
Before you do that, are there, as a practical matter, are there alternatives, non-induction fencing alternatives to what you've presented that would work for you?
The capability of the substation requires so much. And basically, the one that we had presented originally, you know, it almost looked like a prison fence. So that's why now we're more at a decorative fence, and we're trying to maintain what they have as the gateway. So we went with the decorative version of their fence.
My question is, are there other decorative versions?
no, there are not.
There are not, okay.
Is there any of that fence, any properties that you have that has that fence that's relatively near here?
I don't know off the top of my head, I would have to check.
Is there any way of finding out?
We can report that back to the staff.
I appreciate it.
And the early discussions with the staff included a manufacturer's cut sheet which had a number of photographs, so we can provide that. It may be easier for us to see if we can get a sample
I was gonna
of
say, if you
material
got-
rather than a panel to install.
Yeah, if you get a 3x3 piece or something, just something that we can see what it looks like. Only because we just haven't seen it.
Right.
Got something, Bill?
I did, I forgot it all now. I make a motion that we grant preliminary approval to Delmarva Power and Light Company of Maryland for the project located at 509 Morgan Road in Chestertown in the 4th Elected District, Kent County, Maryland. They're requesting preliminary site plan approval for improvements to the existing substation. Proposed upgrades will include rearranging electrical components, buildings, consolidating 4 driveways into 2, replacing an existing chain link fence with a non-conductive panel system with modifications to the existing approved landscape plan from 2021. We find the proposal is consistent with many strategies and goals of the comprehensive plan, that stormwater management, sediment control, and the affiliated sureties must be approved prior to final approval. There are no unreasonable demands on public services or infrastructure. The applicant has noted that the area is removed from any interaction with the public, such as all vehicular and pedestrian movements will be governed by the company in strict compliance with workplace safety. Off-street parking is provided for vehicles when maintenance is required. No new signage is proposed at this time. And the applicant has proposed replacing the existing 6-foot chain link privacy fence with an 8-foot non-conductive panel-based fence. In order to receive final site plan approval, the applicant must address and submit the following outstanding items: stormwater management, sediment and erosion control plans, they must be approved, and any required sureties must be submitted. A final landscaping plan and any required sureties must be approved. We'd like to note that we want to see some change in the configuration, and that will need to be approved by this board to get final approval. And the renderings of the proposed panel fencing and the landscaping along Morgan Neck Road must be reviewed and approved by this board.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Ray Strong?
Aye.
James Saunders? Sean Jones?
Aye.
Paul Ruge? Bill Crowdy?
Aye.
Paula Reeder?
Aye.
And I'll vote with the affirmative. Appreciate your patience excuse me.
At this time, does the board wish to address the landscape waiver related to the evergreens? I believe it's mentioned in the staff report.
Yeah, my staff report, the applicant has submitted a request regarding the evergreen trees in comparison to the 21 plan. We just wanted to see if the planning commission had if they wanted to grant that waiver, saying that the proposed landscaping plan is the same quality and quantity, provides sufficient landscaping for that waiver would be, how you would address that.
Can we do it at final? I mean,
I think the purpose of doing it at this point is it gives the applicant instructions about which way to proceed.
We appreciate the affirmative vote on preliminary, but I think we heard leave the winterberry and red cedars alone, plant only winterberry and no cedars, and, provide more staggering with changes to the layout. So I think we're ambivalent about the outcome. We want to understand what we're supposed to come back with. If there is any consensus, that would be helpful.
well, we had a vote. I mean, I don't know we're
being asked to amend the motion.
I understand that. At first, we have the waiver, which is a little different, but
Yeah, so on page 3 of my, staff report, Article 5, Section 11, B, 6B, of the Kent County Land Use Ordinance authorizes the planning commission to reduce or waive the landscaping requirement when it's demonstrated that the spirit and intent of the requirement outlined above is accomplished through other means, or the nature of the change does not require additional landscaping. And that's on page 3, the first full paragraph, under commercial specific design standards landscaping.
does someone want to make a motion to affirm we are allowing that waiver based on the fact that we didn't discuss the species as much except for how they're planted?
I'll make a motion that the planning commission reduce or waive the landscape requirement previously discussed with the applicant when they can demonstrate that the spirit and intent of the requirement is achieved through other means.
We have a motion, we have a second.
That's that.
We've got a second, any discussion? Call the question, Paula Reeder?
Aye.
Bill Crowdy?
No.
Paul Ruge?
I'm going to vote no.
Sean Jones?
Yes.
James Saunders?
Aye.
Ray Strong?
No.
And I'll vote aye. So that's 4-3, I think.
Yes, sir.
To address, I don't know, are you not comfortable with your chart, with your plans to come forward with a final?
Trying to figure out what do you want to see when we bring it back?
I think we we understand you want to see
A better
representation
plan, yeah.
You want to see a rendering of the entire frontage, but I think we have three different preferences for whether we change the landscape. Either leave it as is and show a rendering of it, eliminate the evergreens and just have shrubs with a demonstration of what the panel looks like, or stagger, add more stagger.
I think it's and/or, I mean, you can, well. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the purpose of the evergreens?
The purpose of the evergreens is really to just soften the view of the substation.
To soften the view?
To provide vertical elements to the landscape.
And that's in requirements.
Well, I think what you heard was a desire not to have everything, squished together, to allow for some growth in the natural shaping of the plants that are selected, and to come up with a plan that addresses the screening requirement, but also creates a softer, more natural view of the screening that's chosen. And I don't think we're stipulating what plants to choose.
No.
It's okay. We're happy to do that. I think the direction we received from the last meeting was add more evergreen trees.
Paul, I like the evergreens. I think we could split them up, maybe run them through there in different areas, because the fence might look great. I mean, who knows, but it's got to look better than what the heck's out there now.
Almost
Other
anything.
And I
than
think
the fact
that,
that
to me,
it's
that's
further off the
trouble. I
road.
don't, personally, that doesn't, impress me as far as what you're gonna spend anyway is to make it more attractive for the gateway. Like James said, the gateway, you're not gonna hide it, but maybe you can make it look better.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We all okay up here? No need break or anyone? And apologies to Mornex Solar and all those that want to speak to that application, but thank you for your patience. Staff?
Speak nice and quick. Morgneck Solar LLC is still requesting preliminary site plan review. They have provided supplemental material that addresses the landscaping and visibility concerns that were raised at the last Planning Commission meeting, and those materials included a detailed landscape plan, planting palette, line of sight profiles, and visual renderings. You had a supplemental memo in your packet that outlined staff's review and some concerns that were raised, technical details on the site plan, and I'm going to let the applicant go through all of those details as part of their presentation, so.
Thank you. Can we add Carla's memo to the record? Thank you. Are the applicants or their representatives available to speak to this application? While you're there, could all those that want to speak, besides the attorney, raise your right hand? Is the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you. And that includes you. Okay, just go state your name and addresses for the record for the statement.
Jake Dixon, 220 Baxter Street, Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Thank you.
Genevieve McFarland, Stevens Palmer, 114 West Water Street, Centerville, Maryland.
Nick Leffner with Kimley Horn and Associates, 215 Washington Ave, Suite 500 in Towson, Maryland.
Thank you.
Val Newcomb, Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm with Urban Growth.
And in case you...
Matt Plesky, 1200 Smith Street, in Houston, Texas.
All right, thank you, guys. All right, go ahead with your testimony.
All right, so I'm Genevieve McFarland. I am local counsel for Urban Grid and Morkneck Road Solar LLC. I have with me today Nick Leffner, who is the engineer on this project, and Val Newcomb, who is with Urban Grid that does community outreach. We heard your comments last time we were here, which was just a few weeks ago, and Nick and his team and Val and her team have been working diligently to address those comments. I just wanted to be clear because there was a little bit of a procedural diversion, I suppose we could say, last time. The first thing we're asking for is the waiver of the berm requirement. And in this case, as you'll see, it's a partial waiver request. And so after we have that discussion and that vote, then we can discuss preliminary site plan. But I wanted to make sure that those were separate issues that we can focus on moving forward. So first I'll have Nick run through our revised site plan that shows the partial berm waiver that we're asking for, as well as the landscaping plan. I believe there are some slides that I have here that I can introduce into the record. Thank you. And
I'm gonna mark this as exhibit. Did you have the exhibits in the record?
We
from the
didn't,
previous-
no.
Okay, so you can mark that as applicant's exhibit 1.
This is all going to be shown?
Yes, so
Okay.
we'll keep
You
it
can,
flipped
you can move it
if that's
around
okay.
if you want, if that's helpful while we
But
watch.
that's what's going to be on the screen.
Okay.
All right, up there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nick Leffner.
Sure, thanks. Appreciate your guys' time again to hear the rest of the case. I think one thing just kind of clarifying is there's not much as far as the site plan change, right? Nothing about the site entrance, fence line, or anything that we really focused on last year changed. More so, I think we just tried to give you a lot more detail regarding the landscape buffer, and then kind of the justification we had of coming in last time saying that there'd be no berm proposed at all. So everything, I don't know if the kind of presentation is still on the screen. On that one. Just so you guys there.
Yeah.
So you know.
Apologize when we point,
Yeah,
that's
when
what
I
we're doing.
point, so. So I think what we try to put together is a lot more views. I'd say kind of just referring back to the last case, we did take a little bit more of a chance of like trying to show a much broader picture, so it might be hard to see sometimes. So in some cases, we tried to give like a little bit of a blow up to make it a little bit clearer for you to see. So like the first piece, if you go to the next slide, is just, it's the overall landscape plan. You're not gonna see much on here. It's the same landscape plan that was presented last time as far as where the buffer location is within the project area. But if you could, which, you know, I think we covered last time, there's, starting on the east side of the project on Morkneck Road, there's the landscape buffer that's just inside the critical area. It's 100% native species that we're proposing in that section of the buffer. As you kind of come into Chestertown down Morkneck Road, there's a standard landscape buffer that kind of has a box around it, and we have some kind of blow-up views of what they look like here in a second. As you get closer down to where the entrance drive is, that's all the standard buffer until you get down to where the existing substation is across the road, and the proposed substation is located on this project site. That was what we call kind of like the wet buffer. With the species are a little bit different, just they're more kind of water tolerant, so that they can stand having wetter soils than what the standard buffer is. On the plan that we came back, we heard you guys last time that, while the code does allow up to 10% of like non-native species to be proposed, we had proposed those and kind of presented it at the last case. Just from a species diversity, there's kind of risk sometimes with local native species with regard to diseases that can affect them. But what we'll present today is we've gone back and just selected and made some tweaks to the genus of the species so that it's 100% native buffer. So all the plant buffers, both in the critical area buffer, the standard buffer, and kind of the wet area buffer, we're gonna call it, it's all native species now. So we've kind of removed all of the non-native part. The code allows up to 10%, we're just gonna come in with 100% native, having heard your feedback last time. And then along the western side of the site, there's the landscape buffer that runs up along the proposed potential future boulevard and kind of hangs back to the east to tie into the existing forest line. Like we talked about last time, kind of in that northwest corner of the project site area, there's existing forested area that goes the rest of the way around through the critical area back out to Morkneck Road. And all the areas outside of the critical area there would be placed into forest conservation easement. And so that was presented on the preliminary forest conservation plan last time. I don't know who has the, we go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So these are copies of the buffers. So the standard buffers in the top left of the screen. That what we tried to do, just to make it a little bit clear, again, I know it might be hard to see. I have a huge copy over there on the board. I can pull it over here if you want to take a closer look at it. We colored in, there's kind of like a light gray in some of the tree symbols and the plant symbols. Those are all the evergreen species. So you can see based on, the code regarding the landscape buffer, we don't have a straight, formal, linear landscape buffer. It's natural, it undulates across the front of it, and I think of it as almost like a number 8, an infinity sign, a double helix, like kind of whatever you want to call it. But we have 2 rows of the evergreen trees that are all spaced 10 foot on center, but they kind of undulate across the entire frontage within that standard buffer, and then interspersed between all of them are the overhead and shade trees, as well as the lower flowering trees. And as we kind of presented last time, we took more priority to providing trees with evergreens, shade, and overstory trees to create more of a natural and native look to the area. Kind of prioritizing trees over shrub plantings because there'll be a pretty extensive, both within the array area itself, but then also the landscape buffer, ground cover with pollinator species that would have, the code has multiple species in it, they'll flower for 2 seasons, so it's kind of the evergreen trees have a more naturalistic layout. We still provided the 2 rows of spacing, the interspersed shade and overstory trees, as well as shade the smaller flowering trees, and then the ground cover with the pollinator species. So that standard typical buffer is everywhere except for where there's kind of the box around it on that overall landscape plan sheet. The boxes represent, I would say, the different areas, right? So the critical area, as well as almost the entirety of Morgan Neck Road, the west side of the site is that standard buffer. If you look down to the bottom left side of the screen, there's the wet area buffer. That's the area where it's a low-laying area. Morgan Neck Road, I don't want to say halfway, but there's a pretty significant section of Morgan Neck Road and areas north of Morgan Neck Road that drain down through a culvert there. So not only is there a culvert that then drains down to waterways downstream, there's a small wetland area just upstream that we want to avoid any kind of impacts to the environmental. So those species just kind of right in that area where it's the low-laying area are a slightly different species type. There's some plant species later on that we can kind of go through. But we maintained a very similar layout, so it still has 2 rows of evergreen trees, spaced 10 foot on center, interspersed shade and overstory trees, as well as flowering trees, and the pollinator ground mix of the ground. In this case, the pollinator mix, there's typically kind of like an upland and then a lower or like wetter tolerant pollinator species, so there'd actually be some diversity in the species as you go down the road too.
Is that location 1 in your photographs?
I believe so, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then on the bottom right-hand side, that's the critical area, the far eastern portion of the site where there's existing forest. I know shading doesn't come up super clear on this view, but there's existing forest around that existing the adjacent residential property, and then we're adding buffering plantings around them. That's also the portion of the project that's furthest away from any solar panels. On the north side of the site, or let's say the top right of the screen you're looking at, has a small section along the road that we've proposed to add a berm. We took a look and we'll kind of walk through some of the sightline studies that we had done, as well as just considering the existing topography for the site. This is essentially from the access drive that's into the project area, west as you come into Chestertown. So this section of the buffer will similarly have a very similar planting. Same species are being proposed, same evergreens, same spacing, overhead, canopy trees. Really the only difference about the berm is we've proposed the code required landscape heights, so the smaller 6-foot trees on top of the berm. We'll cover it as we kind of go through the study that we did on the berm, but really the reduced height plantings, or I'd say like the code required plantings with the berm are proposed, one, to just allow the plants to establish better. Likewise, they'll be staked, so just while trees are establishing, obviously, they come with roots and it takes a while for their roots to kind of establish to hold the tree up. So we propose staking of the trees, especially the evergreen trees. I think that's one that we see during large windstorms. When you first plant the trees, they're just coming out of their root ball, and it takes a while for the roots to get established. So we've proposed just the standard code height required trees in that area to let the roots get established. The smaller plant stock material tends to establish faster than older, more mature landscape stock. And we propose to stake the trees just to help in the event that there is a windstorm or even just a little bit higher winds than normal to make sure that the trees are held upright and there's not damage on the trees. Then if you could go to the next screen. So this is a copy of the plant schedule. Doesn't include all the pollinator species specifically, but if we focused on the shade trees, the medium, small trees, evergreen trees, and then the large shrubs that are proposed within the buffer, we kind of gave the names for each of them. I'm not going to go through all of them just in the interest of time. I know we went pretty long last time with discussion, but we can answer questions. But what we identified over closer to the right-hand side was just the size of the trees with no berms and the size of the tree with the berm. So again, right out of the code, as far as where the berm is being proposed, the code required heights, we did propose the smaller ones just to allow establishment, just a greater chance for the trees to get established and hopefully survive and not get damaged once planted. And then where there's no berm being planted, again, we went with the code required heights for the 8-foot tall trees, 30-inch tall shrubs. You can go to the next screen. This is, we kind of get in like closer to the renderings. This is just a palette, like if you have questions on what the trees look like. These aren't necessarily what they look like every day, but what we try to do is give pictures that are representative of how they may look throughout the year. So obviously the evergreen trees, they're going to stay green all year, or the majority of the year, whereas some of the deciduous trees, shade trees, overstory trees that we're proposing, they'll change colors throughout the season, they will lose their leaves, but that's why the evergreens are there to kind of provide consistent screening throughout the year. It's also kind of representative, it's kind of difficult to tell sometimes for scale, that a lot of the evergreen trees, deciduous trees will grow much taller, a lot of the flowering and the smaller flowering trees will stay smaller, and then again, we do have shrubs at the ground level, but the majority of the ground level plantings will be the pollinator grasses that will be able to grow up. And then I'll add one, I know our landscape architect can't be here, but even with a lot of the evergreen species, we try to be selective of ones that aren't necessarily grow really fast and then I would say become top heavy, like pines sometimes. The closer they're planted to other plants, they tend to grow fast, but then they're really bare on the trunk. So the trees tend to be, I'll say, kind of top heavy, where most of the needles or leaves on the evergreens will stay a lot higher. A lot of the evergreen species that we did were done intentionally to keep them kind of bottom heavy so that they're not, as they're growing up, they maintain foliage and branches and leaves closer down to the ground level just to provide more screening. Can you go to the next one? So this is one of the sections, so I think it was that kind of, you said section 1 that we'll show in a bit. This is one of the ones we tried to show a really far distance, so it's hard to show closely. On the top right of the screen is the red line represents kind of where we cut a section through the site. So if you were standing or driving along Mork Neck Road and you were looking into the site along that red line, kind of your line of sight would be that profile that's shown on the bottom of the screen. The 00 down on the bottom left corner of the screen kind of represents where Mork Neck Road is and where there's a label that says eye height. It might be difficult to read. Essentially, if you're a car driving down the road, kind of what your perspective would be driving. And then what we try to do is it's difficult to see, but it's labeled as existing or proposed grade. That's like the actual ground surface, like the elevation on site. That's kind of a gray dashed line that runs along the bottom of the view. Above that, there's a blue line that's the solar panel, so that kind of represents like the height of the solar panel as it's following grade throughout the site. You'll see this is a section of the project where on the western side of the project, there's panels like closer along Morg Neck Road. Then there's the hill, kind of in the middle of the project where there's no panels proposed. And then again, there's panels kind of proposed at the top of the hill. If you look at the site plan, there's kind of a break between the panels. So there's a blue line closer to Morg Neck Road, and then there's a blue line much further to the right-hand side of the screen that also represents where that kind of second batch of solar panels would be. Above that, there's a black dashed line that we drawn in to represent kind of your line of sight. So if you were looking from your car going down Morg Neck Road, coming into Chestertown, and you look to the panels at the top of the hill, we drew a line just between the two of them, kind of like if you were to look over top of the panels. And so the blow up on the top left is that black line, just to represent that your full line of sight into the site is obstructed by the landscape buffer. So if you were looking over the trees, you would be looking over the solar panels, if that makes sense. So there really won't be any unobstructed view of the solar panels, both closest to Morg Neck Road or further away from Morg Neck Road. The landscaping is going to break up and provide screening for the project. If you were looking, I think there were some concerns of just how high the elevation changes. Is like, if you're really looking over the trees, you would be looking over the trees into the skyline or the vista view, essentially. Go to the next one. So this is, whoops, back. Yeah, that one there. This is just the second view, very similar cut that we did. We did one closer to the site entrance, and I think it was during, when we did this section, we essentially did the same thing, right? It's near the site entrance elevation. Along Morg Neck Road, it's the same gray existing ground line, the same blue solar panel elevation line, the same black line of sight line. Similar situation here, if you look at kind of the overall site plan, where there's a section of panels closer to the road, there's a break in the panels as you go up the hill, there's solar panels at the top of the road. This kind of gives you the same condition where your line of sight going up to the solar panels would be broken up, if you look at the top left, by again the landscape. But this is the section of the project that if we did smaller plantings and that they were 8 foot tall, you would still get the same kind of, you would have an obstructed view of any of the solar panels. But when we start to look through some of the site renderings that we did, as you start down to the substation, or proposed substation area, Morg Neck Road closer to Chestertown, there's a natural berm there. We have a couple of pictures of it where it's, we heard last time that there's some natural undulation as you're coming into Chestertown. So there's a berm further to the west, I'd say even off of our site in front of some of the commercial residential properties. And then as you get to that low kind of wet area, the berm drops down, but then the berm kind of comes back up again. And so what we proposed to do is essentially, the berm's already naturally about 3 feet above Morg Neck Road. So that portion of the property, we just proposed to request the waiver to not have a berm if the natural berm exists, just provide landscaping on top of it, but then continue that kind of berm feature to the east until we get to the entrance, so that there'd be a berm essentially from the west side of the site to the site entrance, with the exception of where the proposed substation and that low wetland area are, with kind of the code 6 foot tall trees above them, because we're still able to provide that unobstructed view. Could you go to the next screen? Yeah, so this is a picture kind of just along the side of Morg Neck Road when you're down near that low laying area. So you can kind of see just to the left of the photo where I forget if it was an advertisement or it might have been this project's posting sign that was in the corner. You can see the natural grades quite a few feet above Morg Neck Road. That sign's probably 24 inches, 30 inches tall. Then as you continue east as you travel out of Chestertown, that grade drops down to that low wetland area and then it comes back up, and we have another picture of that here in a second. Could you go to the next screen? So this is a copy of the rendering. I think in the staff report, they made a comment about one of the renderings that we had submitted. There was a section of the existing trees that weren't added back into the model yet, but if you see the trees that are kind of closer to the road and they look way taller than the other ones, if you look in the photo prior, could you go back one slide? Those trees are there, so that kind of represents where those trees are, kind of their height relative to the poles. So those trees would be proposed to just remain. Then if you could go back to the rendering slide, yeah, so, you know, we show what the landscape buffer height would be, keeping those existing trees down where there's kind of the low-laying area, but then to the right of the view is where we propose to maintain that existing berm, and then kind of continue the berm to the site entrance.
At 3 feet.
So the one here, this is where we said the 2-year maturity at existing grade. Could you go back one more picture? It's kind of hard to see. There's already a berm for a section of Mork Neck Road, so that's why kind of down in this area on the further western side along Mork Neck Road, we requested the waiver to provide the taller tree species because there's already kind of a natural berm in that area. If you could go to the next one. So that shows providing the taller trees at existing ground because there's already kind of a natural berm as you get closer to Chestertown. Could you go to the next one? So this is much further down the site. You can see the site's still a little bit higher than Mork Neck Road, but it starts to get, the further east you go, the closer down to the elevation of Mork Neck Road it gets. So could you go to the next screen? So this is an area where the berm is kind of on the west side where we're going to maintain the existing. I think we can go one more down. So, sorry the pictures come back the other way, but I drove up and down the road taking pictures to try to get good ones to show that we could render. Could you go to the next screen? So location 3 is down where the site entrance location is. You can kind of see the red star if you look at the top right of the screen on the key map. That's kind of like representative of where the picture was taken at the site that we rendered. That's where we would propose to add the berm. So that would be a berm with just the 6-foot tall plantings on the top of it. There's a lot of, kind of open green area in the front. That's really the case prior to us had a similar issue with existing utilities. That overhead transmission line, that's really the transmission line easement, and then our landscape buffer is put, again, I think I represented last time, as close to Mork Neck Road as we could while still keeping all the plants back, so that even if they did grow, that easement's 50 foot wide, landscape buffer 60 feet wide. The kind of forefront of the buffer would be the lower pollinator species. That's where we have the shrubs proposed, and the lower flowering trees are closer to Mork Neck Road, which lets us keep the overstory trees, canopy trees, and evergreens a little bit further away from the power lines. So even if they did grow to the 40 or 60 feet tall, there's, I would say, little to no risk of them having to be pruned or cut because they're set back so far off of that existing power line. Could you go to the next screen? This is kind of as you go one more. Yeah, so that was, we shared this one last time, I think, it just wasn't on the screen. So that was the actual site entrance where there'd be existing grade with taller trees to the east of the site entrance, and then there'd be a proposed berm with the 6-foot trees to the west of the site access location. Could you go to the next screen? This is, again, we just kept kind of going further and further from Chestertown, where, go to the next screen, where we have the rendering of, again, just the existing ground. This is the area where providing a berm, it would really block a lot of the runoff coming off of the site because the site it's a very shallow grade out to Mork Neck Road. The slopes are nowhere as steep as on that western side where there's kind of a hill in the middle of the site. And so the existing roadside channel drains everything to the east. So we didn't propose a berm in this location just because I think we kind of demonstrated with the sections we're able to have the obstructed view coming into the site, and providing just the taller trees obstructs the view from the panels because there's not as much elevation change as you get to the western portion of the site. And then could you go back a couple, back to the low lay, back to the location 1. Just where kind of we stopped the berm. I think we talked about how there's the existing berm and then there's the low laying area. One of the questions people may have is well, if there's a berm to the west of the property and then you're proposing to extend the berm to the east until you get to the site access, We purposely didn't propose the berm where those existing trees are. Just because there's existing vegetation that screened the project already. And we purposely didn't propose a berm there because, just for safety standpoint. Providing a berm there would actually block water from coming off of the road. Whereas today, the water comes into the site, down into that low-lying wetland area, and then through the culvert underneath Mork Neck Road. So providing a berm in that area would make it really challenging to allow the water to get underneath Mork Neck Road without kind of purposely holding it out along the roadway as opposed to just letting it enter into the site and drain it away it does today. Similarly, if we put a berm, further back into our site in that area, that's, I think, what we tried to talk about last time and maybe didn't do a great job of describing, is you'd essentially be building a dam on our property that none of the water would get off and it could have the risk of flooding out some of the equipment and potentially even adjacent properties.
Can you entertain questions?
Let him, are you finished?
And I'll keep going on the landscape buffer piece if you want.
We want,
I was just gonna read through the code pieces, but I can do that after.
well, I think I hope our side has read the code. I mean, we have to refer to it, but we do. So we need to consider this, your testimony on the berm waiver is complete and, okay.
And I can, if you'd like, I touched on a lot of the berm waiver requests last time. I think as far as the western side of the site, a lot of offsite properties drain into the sites. We didn't propose a berm there. Last time, we also represented the eastern portion of the property. It's very flat and drains out to Mork Neck Road, that would cause drainage issues as well. Down near the substation area, kind of filling in the gap with a berm would cause drainage issues. I think what we went back and did is identify the small section kind of between where that natural berm is and where the site access location is. We could add a berm into that portion of the site. It already drains towards the west. We would affect the natural drainage, but I think it could be mitigated with just engineering kind of design. And then we wanted to give just, I think what was requested last time was the physical layout of the landscape plantings. So, kind of heard in the last case, not having the formal one, we had a rendering, but it was only one last time. So we gave a copy of the landscape planting plan, the representative species. We changed the 10% non-native to just 100% native species. We gave sight lines to demonstrate that the view of the solar panels would be adequately screened within 2 years to the areas that there is no berm. And then, incorporated kind of a section of the berm. So I think what Genevieve mentioned earlier is we're requesting kind of a partial waiver to the berm, where it's really, we'll provide the berm kind of as shown on the plan from kind of that site entrance location to a portion to the west. And then the rest of it, we would still propose no berms, but still meet the code requirements of having a smaller plan.
I've never been good at north, south, east, and west.
Wait a minute, I just want to make sure, we're considering a berm waiver now, and if you have questions.
Partial, yes.
Partial berm waiver.
Just to make it easy for us visually with what we have. As I understand it, you're asking for a berm waiver for location 1 in your group and a berm waiver for location 5 in your group. Is that true? Is that accurate?
It's not so much by location. I'd say we're still requesting the berm waiver that we requested last time, except for where the overall landscape plan that we provided, there's a box that calls out, and there's a separate detail provided on the plan. I don't know if you have a copy of it.
Yep, we do.
It's like, we'll propose a berm in that area. It's essentially everywhere but there is where we're requesting.
Right at the first one, the boxes they will be bermed, buffer with berm. To Paul's question, on location 5, can you bring that slide up? Beth?
Yeah.
Oh. Location, it's the very end, I guess, I think.
Too far.
There you go. That rendering, that's with no berm, but the bergamot in that area is a foot taller than what's in front on that slide. I mean, that slide is somewhat misleading. That looks like a berm. to me, not a 3-foot berm, but it looks like a berm.
Well, it's, I think a lot of that is the ground cover plantings, the pollinators, that grow up to be multiple feet.
So the ones in front won't grow as high as the ones in the back?
Yeah, the easement line, the DPL transmission line easement, we didn't propose pollinator plantings all the way out to Mork Neck Road. The rendering just shows pollinator species within the 60-foot landscape buffer.
But they grow taller in the back near the trees, in that
So like
slot.
the front would kind of be like if you had grass growing.
No, I meant the pollinator habitat we're looking at. The bergamot in front is shorter than the bergamot in the back. Why is that?
I'm not sure.
No, it's just the plant height.
Yeah, I understand. In the pollinator habitat, that looks like there's somewhat of a berm there. That rendering,
He's saying no.
it looks like it's a berm to
The
me.
site continues to go up into the property.
Not there, no, it doesn't.
No,
That's a flat piece there, that's a low area, that one. You can look at the elevations on that.
Yeah, do you have a copy of the site plan?
Yeah. The other one while I have you, don't want to hold up other people, on location 1, you mentioned the drainage where that tree is there, and I understand we don't want to block drainage, but you could have a berm on either side of the drainage. You don't have to have a linear berm. Can't berms move and angle to allow drainage or engineer to allow drainage?
Yeah, so it's a low, so just to that question first, that's a low area for more.
It's a well-drained area. That area drains very well there in the Morneck Road. That ditch comes, you can see how it's cut.
Yeah.
Because you're farther back, unless you would dam it with a berm, but if you don't dam it, it would drain off there.
Yeah, and
You would not impact drainage there.
the drainage comes from both sides of Mork Neck Road though, so it's kind of a sag in Mork Neck Road, whereas you're coming from the east.
The drainage there does not come from both sides of Morneck Road.
So from the east and the west.
Oh, that's not, the east and west of, north of Morneck
If
Road.
you're driving.
Not
out
both
of Chester-
sides.
If you're driving out of Chestertown, you're driving downhill. And then if you're driving into Chestertown, you're driving downhill. And that's like.
That's one side of Morneck Road. It's all going there.
Correct.
One side of Morneck, the north side of Morneck Road. Both sides meet south and north, I believe, in my world.
If you like from yellow line to shoulder, water drains into the site. But if you're driving down the road from the bridge east of the project area, you kind of come up as you're driving down Mork Neck Road. Then you start to drive down as you're coming into Chestertown where the substation's located. And that's a low spot in Mork Neck Road. Then you start coming back up as you continue going into Chestertown. The water going to that spot is draining from the double yellow into the side of the.
If you don't dam that gully that's there now, you'll never back up water there. That runs, you got quite a fall there. I mean, I can look at the elevations if they're on here, but anyway, but that's to my questions. It looks that you could handle the berms on that side, but.
We have received some feedback from landowners that in the past there was still a fair net cost issue in that general area. Maybe that's, what's driving some of the concern along that area, but yeah, the intention.
We've also heard that from Public Works. When we had a preliminary meeting with Public Works, they said that they wanted us to be really intentional about the location and not impacting the drainage because they.
But if you didn't block the drainage from the site, you just moved your berms. The berm doesn't have to be linear.
Correct.
Can it move on an angle to allow drainage?
I guess I'm confused. Like there is a berm to the west of the low spot. There is a berm to the east of the low spot, and then there's a break which lets the water get off the road into the culvert. It's only, I don't know, 50 feet wide, break in the berm.
There's no berm, there's no berm there.
He says there's a natural elevation.
The natural elevation, but on the east side, there's the rise is so minimal. The one side, the knoll on the west side is substantial, but not on the other side.
Yeah, the other side,
Are the
it's about.
which
3
site
feet.
do you have the elevations on here so I can, whether need a magnifier, but.
On, do you have the site plan, like the initial submission site plan package,
No, didn't you provide that?
214?
Do we have the initial, we didn't get the site plan again, I guess.
I have a big copy of it.
Anyway, those are my, I don't hold up, we've got other questions up here.
I guess, just as you're looking into the site, I know that it's not a lot higher, but you also have to remember the landscape buffer's already proposed 50 feet off of the road.
Yeah, that's why I won't think you would impact the drainage, that's what I'm getting.
And then but the berm that we're proposing to plant on top of is, we're literally planting the landscape buffer on top of that berm.
Okay, I'm misunderstanding, but without elevations, I don't want to challenge, I'm sorry. Go ahead, anyone else? I'm sorry. Any other questions? If not, is there anyone in the public or online that wishes, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, at the last meeting, we discussed this substation and its proximity to the residential use next door. And, I said we'd like to see that moved, and it hasn't changed a bit. So that's one question. I didn't see it in the report of the concerns that we had. That didn't even come up in the report, but that was a concern. And, I'm assuming they're talking about a power line, but there's no power line running from the road north on that property that I can see.
If I may, I think we wanted to get the berm waiver out of the way first and then discuss the preliminary site plan, and have discussions on that, but for,
Because I wouldn't.
keeping the focus on the partial berm waiver at this point, I think would be, best for directing the discussion.
Well, I'm a little confused anyhow, because it says we're looking at concept and.
I know that, I said that too, but here it says preliminary, I thought it was concept, but, okay, well, any other up here questions on just the berm waiver? And I've got a list of persons that have indicated they'd like to speak, but this would be on the berm waiver first, and just hold your comments if you have it on other items. The first list is Janet Christensen Lewis, and indicate you'd like to speak.
Splitting this into two sections greatly impairs the ability of people to comment on the whole project. So it's not typical of how planning and permission hearing goes. And, I will go ahead and speak, but I will be speaking to some of the other issues that this plan has, and it's all part of the presentation that I already have put together. I can't split it out based on their whims about how they want this hearing to be directed.
This is what you get the big bucks for. No, I only think they requested it here. They didn't request it in the packet, as far as I know. It was just upside.
I'm sorry, it was requested at the last hearing, and that's why we tabled
Okay.
the whole thing, and then it was requested in that letter that was from Urban Grid as well.
Okay.
And I think in terms of legal procedure, because you have the discretion as the planning commission to give that waiver or not, it's appropriate to address that first before we go to the entire preliminary site plan, because one is going to kind of dictate the other, so to speak.
So if I understand you correctly, you're suggesting that if the berm waiver is denied, it impacts everything that you're going to propose in the subsequent application?
That's correct.
So, Mr. Chair, my experience, I obviously have not sat with this body before, but my experience is that if there were two separate applications on the table, that you would in fact address them individually. And I think that in this case, it sounds as if there's good reason for doing that.
I did read our minutes, and we voted on them. I don't remember if it was specified in there, but we've got them here. But, anyone's thoughts, but what we're going to have is testimony that will veer off into other items then. I don't think we can stop that.
To the extent that the testimony can be separated out, we should attempt to do that. If the speakers sort of veer into the other application, I would recommend that you ask them to hold that conversation until we reach the appropriate issue.
I would like advice on that at times. All right, go ahead. Can you raise your right hand? Can you guys just, thank you, just make room for, you can slide off, but. Is testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
And your name and address for the record.
Janet Christensen Lewis, Millington, Maryland. Can I have the slides? I'm going to veer off, and I can't separate it out, so you'll have to bear with me. Let me start with outlining some fraction of the issues with this current application. The panels are not being screened at 2 years in accordance with the provisions of the land use ordinance. The line of sight eye height used by Urban Grid does not conform to most drivers. The line of sight was not shown representing the actual view of a driver using 291 east or west. The applicant has representations in the packet of the purported screening that shows unrealistic fullness and height of the trees at 2 years. The entrance into the site exposes the road to visuals of the project contrary to Kent County's land use ordinance. And in all the pretty pictures we are shown, where is the substation and overhead wires? Can I have the next slide? The staff report has told you that the applicant has not met the requirements of the land use ordinance. Can I have the next slide? The pretty renderings the applicants have supplied to represent the landscape at 2 years shows solar panels visible in every generated scenario. The landscaping, even with a minimum 3-foot berm, is inadequate. Can I have the next slide? The applicant has not presented a line of sight from a driver's perspective. Driver's field of vision while driving rarely is directed to the extreme left or right. 5. Next slide. This slide is an overlay of the applicant's site plan onto a Google map. From the road looking across the property, you can see that the 65 to 70 foot rise, which will be increased by 8 to 10 feet with the panels of sun rotation. Next slide. When viewing a person standing in what is proposed to be the non-bermed landscape, it becomes evident that the sweeping vista seen by a driver on 291 will not be blocked by 8, 12, or likely 14-foot trees. The applicants claim that 3.5 feet is the eye height of a driver passing the project on 291 and base the line of sight simulations on this measurement. Also, there's no indication of the solar panels being flat or raised. Next slide. The applicants, we found that measuring a 5'4" woman and a 6'1" male in different vehicles did not support the eye height data used by the applicant. These changes would significantly alter the line of sight calculations presented by the applicant. The eye height of a short woman in a pickup truck is 2 feet greater than the data the applicant used to do their line of sight. Next slide. The applicant's other illustrated content is also misleading. It would require some unlikely super growth to have an 8-foot holly tree at planting reach 14 to 16 feet in 2 years. But if that's a 6-foot male and you kind of put a caliper on the whole thing, that's basically what they're illustrating. The next slide. Another picture shows the same extraordinary growth, and this is not just in height. You're looking at trees that have produced an amazing and improbable amount of lateral growth. This is a graphic representation and is not real life. Slide number, next one. The applicant's 60-foot wide landscape, which they claim will provide the appropriate screening at 2 years, contains less plant material when compared with the 50-foot wide Bluegrass Solar Project in Queen Anne's County. The number of large evergreen trees planted for the Bluegrass Solar Project exceeded that of Morgan Neck Road's proposed plan. Next slide. And we can see exactly the growth and coverage of that landscape with over 3.5 years of growth. These evergreens are on drip irrigation, which is required by Queen Anne's County. Next slide. The applicant's depiction shows that the gate and the solar panels will be fully visible. Article 5, Section 11 of the Kent County Landscape Ordinance specifically addresses that the entrances of the project should not be observed from neighboring properties, public right-of-ways or roads, and should be screened from view, and that the use of wire mesh, chain link gate, or fence with vinyl interwoven strips is not an acceptable way to hide the array. Next slide. The Planning Commission now has more information than was presented in the last attempt by the applicant to get a preliminary site plan approval. However, the reliability of the information is problematic. The data used to produce line-of-sight information is questionable, as is the plant material growth rates and coverage of the landscape within 2 years. Now that the engineers at Urban Grid have determined that berms are possible and will not cause catastrophic water retention that would electrocute workers, as was argued in the previous hearing, the Planning Commission can determine where and how high berms should be and where natural land contours allow waivers to be granted. The applicant is still resisting this Planning Commission's request for installed irrigation, which is based on the experience of landscape failures in Kent and Queen Anne's County. Visuals of the substation and overhead wires are necessary but absent. The emphasis on meeting a deadline for this meeting appears to have driven the applicant rather to be what's driving the applicant, rather than putting together a well-thought-out plan to enhance the community and comply with our land use ordinance. Instead, they chose cheap agrivoltaics as a crafty substitute to pull the wool over the commissioner's eyes. Thank you for allowing me this time to comment on this project, and I request that the Planning Commission deny the current request for the waiver of berms as outlined in the plan that they put forward.
Thank you. John Lysinger. Raise your right hand. The testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And your name and address for the record.
John Lysinger, Kennedyville.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to follow up on Janet's comments. There's a video which I want to play.
You can do it now.
I want to just start the first photograph and move on. Pause, please. This is a picture of me a couple days ago.
Oh,
and
you need to go back.
Yes, just stop there, please. The point is, I'm 6'1", and you can see that the foliage in the field, this is in the lower eastern corner of the property, is about to my hip, knee perhaps. And the grasses that they're proposing are about that high, and you can see how much above my head the property goes. Would you go to the next one? One of the points I want to make here is that, unlike what's just been said, the road is actually...
You want it to pause?
Yeah, stop, right, oh,
Stop.
just stop right there, please. One of the things that we've just heard is that the road is higher than the field in many areas, and in fact, it's just the opposite. And what we're going to see as we go along, just play the tape, please. As we drive along from the east to the west on Boardneck Road, it's a mile of frontage, and you can see that this is about 25, 30 miles an hour. From the car window, most of that is below the road. So even if you have the findings that they suggest, you're going to see over them from any car. And even with the addition of a 3-foot berm, it won't really make any difference. It really needs to be higher than that. So here we are, crawling along the road at 30 miles an hour. You get a sense as to how much coverage we have, how much of the gateway in Chester County this really is. Here we are zipping along, it's going to keep rolling, This is how big the site really is. It's not what it looks like on the plat. And it's saying no berm along the way, because they're proposing no berm this whole distance. Now, they're talking about 1,250 feet of berm out of 5,000 feet, and I presume that includes some of the natural berm. From what I can tell from the plans, which are a challenge to read. So here we are speeding up. You're still seeing the same thing. The field is, for most of this distance, either at road level or below road level. And here it begins to rise as we see the driveway. So 1,265 feet of berm proposed, and they would say 3 feet. I would say that's not nearly high enough. If we just keep going to the end, we'll come to the place where the substation is. So, as Janet has pointed out, the line of sight that's in their drawings is 3.5 feet, which is about as high as a child, let alone a person in a car or a truck, an adult person. And you get no sense of that from their materials. The plants that they're talking about are, as we just saw, from 2 to 6 feet high. And one of the things we should know about trees and shrubs is they take 2 to 3 years to establish before they begin to grow. So we should assume, even with irrigation, that the plants they put in, the 6-foot tree they put in 3 years, which should be 6 foot. And we know there's going to be mortality, which leads to issues of compliance and monitoring, which is another issue altogether. So, I can't get into some of the notions of the plants themselves, but as a rule, this is according to the University of Minnesota's Extension Service, which publishes extensively on this stuff. It will take 2 to 3 years for a 2 to 3 inch caliper tree to grow, to be established. And that's well beyond what we can be thinking about in terms of the design of this, because that means that really 10 years from now, we'll be looking at something that's still very young and very gapping. I just want to make one point about species along the way. One of the most popular plants, one of the plants they intend to install most frequently is a sumac. I don't know if you're familiar with sumacs, but they're invasive and weedy and unattractive, but they do spread. And if that's the look that we want to see in the gateway to Chestertown, I would have an argument with you, because I think it's not. Most people, when we see a sumac tree, we think we should cut it down. They'll grow 20 feet wide as well as 20 feet high, and they do spread. So that's really all I wanted to talk about. There's been some talk about sheep.
But this is going to veer out of.
Yeah, let's not do that.
We'll get another chance to testify about.
My point is that as Janet has shown you, other solar projects, compliance, monitoring, and enforcement is going to be important. They've talked about watering the shrubs and trees with a water truck. Good practice for most of these trees and shrubs is to water them almost daily for the first couple weeks, weekly thereafter, and give them for the first 6 months in effect. And that's a major expenditure which shouldn't be dismissed easily, or we are inviting mortality, which again reinforces the need for a berm. Thank you.
Joe, I have a question.
I'm so
Wait,
sorry.
you better-
One moment. Did we have a copy of the slides that the prior witness?
We have them on our, no, we don't have copies of those slides. We just have them electronically, but we can certainly print them.
I want to make sure they're in the record.
Okay.
And I want to make sure they're labeled as exhibits, and I'm.
Okay.
How do you want us to go? I mean, we heard 2 videos. You want to label those videos presentations or what?
Yeah, so the first would be opponents exhibit 1.
Okay.
And the second, the video we just saw with the opponents exhibit too.
Okay.
And since they can't physically
We'll print
stick
them
a
out.
tag, yeah, you're not gonna be able to print out the video, so we're just gonna have to make reference to it.
Okay.
And just so long as the record.
The video is not a record?
It is, right, but I can't label it.
Oh.
So I just want the record to reflect,
Do you-
because if there's an appeal from this, then all of the material in the record gets transmitted. And so,
So every time someone comes up with any kind of electronic presentation, we should
we
label
should
it first?
designate
Okay,
it
thank you. Okay.
if it can't be physically printed and labeled. I think it won't be a problem producing, including a video with the record. You just have to put it on a thumb drive or something to that effect, so.
We're printing the 2 PowerPoints now, so.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to, we'll, in doubt, we'll ask. Paul, you had a question?
Yeah, Joe, John, I have a quick question for you. If indeed, and I appreciate the fact that you've taken all these measurements, if the land sits lower than the road, wouldn't it stand to reason that the solar arrays will also sit lower?
Yes, it would, except that the road's level.
I understand, but in terms of defining the required height of trees from the vantage point of the road, if the actual site is lower than the road, then that's,
The elevation changes, we don't have, we weren't given the site, we had last month's site plan, I don't have it, maybe someone else does, but I don't have it.
well, I'm just trying to absorb
I
the
think the elevation
requirement.
changes everywhere, that's my point, I think you have to look at the elevation, whatever that is.
Paul, your point is correct. Panels will sit lower in terms of total elevation, but relative to the view from the road, it gets worse.
Not if the
Okay,
trees are
let's-
sufficient.
Okay, he's making a statement, you had a question.
Okay, I understand. I'm not
Um,
gonna debate that.
Tom Tucker.
I'm not Tom Tucker, but I'm on paper.
You're a lot better looking than Tom, oh, never mind. Raise your right hand for the record. This testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Name and address for the record.
Thomas Tucker, physical address is 5311 Lane, Elburn Lane, Rockwall, Maryland. But the property address, where we're going to hopefully be moving to in the next year, is 520 Wardneck Road, property adjacent to this.
Great, thank you.
It's my wife, Melanie Tucker.
Thank-
Tucker, 5311 Elmer Lane. Rockland,
Thank you.
Maryland.
All right. Yes, sir, and we're talking about the berms now, with screening.
Okay, the berms only?
Well, what the screening of it, I guess that's, because the berm, whatever screening will be is, the berm question arises.
I do have a question about the berms, so, I'm sorry.
So.
Testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and what?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And we need to make sure there's one witness testifying at a time, so if this witness wants to testify and then your husband can testify after you, will that be okay? Okay.
Okay, you go ahead, Mona.
I don't know anything about all of this with berms and all this stuff, but there's mention about a substation. Where on the property in the field would a substation be placed? Do the berms have anything to do with that?
Berms do if they would be required from the visual side there, from where you may impact you. In other words, we're talking about road frontage mostly. I think, my understanding is you're probably talking about, I know where your property is, you're talking about where you would see it from your property. I guess it does.
Would we see the substation?
We don't have a rendering of that, so I don't know.
Can the people here tell us?
So,
Go ahead.
unfortunately, this is your opportunity to testify. It's not a question and answer.
So am I testifying like I don't want it there?
You will testify to whatever you have to say
I
to
don't want
the
it there.
Okay, thank you.
I mean,
I understand. And you think the question of a berm would not, then you wouldn't want to, whatever you want, you wouldn't want a berm or not, it doesn't, is that what you said?
if the berm has to do with the substation,
Well, I'm talking about the screening, whatever that is.
the screening,
the berm is part of the screening, I guess.
There's gonna be a substation, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that substation gonna be on the property of the field where the grids are?
Yes.
Do we know where that substation is going to be?
Yes.
Can you tell me where that substation is gonna be?
It's on the plat, and I don't have the dimensions, but it's on the side adjacent to the property you mentioned,
It's on the side
of
adjacent.
of the address you gave of your property, yeah.
The gentleman will give her a copy, I
So
guess.
where are we talking about the side?
He'll show you, I guess, it'd be easier.
I don't know where you live, but that's it.
Where would the house be going up the lane? There's a lane next to the field. Do you know where that is?
I don't know,
Over
like,
here.
I don't know what, I'm sorry.
Your house is up here.
So where would the substation be?
Way down here. Oh, so there's like the silos up here. A long line.
In
There's like a.
Silos in the field.
Yes, yeah, I do.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
the record is going to be enormously difficult to produce if you have a side
You know this
conversation.
property?
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Excuse me, counsel is a good point. We can't have sidebar here, description.
This is Morg Neck Road right here. Right here, that's Morg Neck Road. So
What we're having is a
Chestertown-
discussion of location of a
Gentlemen.
substation, but we're going to have to end that. I mean, if you don't, you can, your question was you don't want to see a substation, is that what?
Yes, sir.
This was in, Mr. Chair, all the documents being used are the documents you have, documents that are right here. You have a full-scale version. It's all the same thing.
Right, okay. All right, Mr. Tucker, go ahead.
She's basically said what I want to say. The only thing is, we bought the property about 8 years ago. We've got electric on the east side, no, I'm sorry, the west side of it's coming all down on those, and then those power lines. We've got electric in the front. Now we're gonna have electric all on the other side of us. We're worried also about our health. I mean, there's a lot of electric buzzing around, and we just are concerned, but it's gonna be it's not gonna look very nice at all, and we're gonna have to look at that stuff every day of our life. So we'll be boxed in, and that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Where that property is. Is that the house that's up there?
Judy Gifford. Name and address of record.
Judy Gifford, 12246 Locust Grove Road, Kennedy-Ville, Maryland.
Is the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I just want to say that I don't know if any of you really understand. I don't quite get where the berms are needed, because I don't understand who's correct in presenting information about height and sight, line of sight. So I think it's a very difficult decision to make at this point. And I also want to say that I think the berms are critical because, as we saw in that landscaping picture from Queen Anne's County, it looks like crap. And if you've got that landscaping looking like crap, then it's not going to get any better than that, because these guys have left town, there's no bond money, there's no enforcement. So what do you have as a visual mitigation without the berm? So I think it's very critical to think this waiver through thoroughly, and I think the implications are huge on your decision about the waiver, and I would recommend that you deny the waiver. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go back to the next, you've skipped over some people that were signed up.
Well, I did, all I had, it said indicated to speak. I'll go through, I'll give everyone a chance. The next one that indicated they would like to speak is Elizabeth Watson.
She already did.
I know that I'm not on the list, can't be signed
You need to turn back the page, the other way.
This is the order I was given, then, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, we'll number them back in next time.
So,
Is this your first meeting, Joe?
I think they shuffled the deck wrong on me here. So, this is page 3, then. 2. Okay, then we're on page 2. I apologize. Daniel Derderer.
I don't have anything to say about that.
All right, thank you, sir. Tom Kokobinski. Name and address for the record.
Thomas Kokovinsky, 543 High Street, Chestertown.
Is testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Before I begin, I also have not parsed out comments, and I do have some comments relating to the gateway, public amenities, and the substation. And obviously, I would reserve my right to hear again today to make
If you
comments
can hide
on
to the
those.
berm, that would be great.
But right now, I'm going to focus on the berm. My comments, opinions, and exhibits presented at the July meeting are reiterated here today by reference. On that note, too, I hope that they have been also entered into the record. If not, then I will provide copies again.
I was not here, I cannot say.
It's part of the recorded.
I guess we were a little less formal about, we assumed what was testified and handed in was in the record, but if that should be stated, we should do it.
Yes, let's state for the record that anything that was said or introduced at the last hearing will be part of the record. Did you submit something in writing, or was it just testimony?
I submitted verbal testimony, but it was supplemented by a PowerPoint presentation, which was provided directly to the planning board.
Okay, so that, we're going to retrieve that and make that Protestants Exhibit 3.
Okay.
Is that,
I hope that's I guess it's being recorded, so we know it. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So referencing that exhibit, I have not wavered on the nestled berm buffer design I propose, or the reasons why I believe it best benefits the county and its residents. I reviewed the applicant's revised design and conclude it still fails to provide an effective buffer along Route 291. Berm height should be 6 to 8 feet to reasonably work. Berm should extend along the entire frontage of the solar field. And I add, drainage concerns, you heard today, can be effectively addressed by using the nestled berms, rain gardens, recharge basins, and piping, underground piping to drainage swells along the highway. I also add that the buffer is not reasonably fail-safe. Irrigation is missing to sustain, and I want to emphasize, condensed plantings, all who are competing for water that would raise the mortality concerns. I also want to offer comments on a very important point made in July. Mr. Crowding noted that a 3-foot high berm was minimal per the ordinance, and he is correct. And he goes on to suggest requiring more of an applicant when warranted. He is correct on this point as well. I view the 144,000 black panels in large regimented rows akin to a Roman legion with their glistening shields marching across the once tranquil 244-acre vista, a public nuisance without an effective buffer. If ever there was a clear case for requiring more than the minimum, this is surely it. In my industry, building codes are recognized as even being minimum. They are a starting point on which good judgment and experience is applied to fulfill the code requirements. It is my professional obligation to move beyond the minimum standard of care when warranted. As an expert in construction and building design matters, I have testified to the validity of this belief. Minimum is a beginning and not necessarily an end. In my view, you are seated to review and apply provisions of the ordinance with good judgment and experience, resulting in a site design that protects the interests of the public. Designs, like decisions, have consequences, and in this case, the adherence to a minimum would result in detriment to the public good. Finally, we as residents are here to be accommodated, not to accommodate. We are being asked to accommodate an ineffective buffer design with a lack of sustenance by irrigation. It should be the applicant's desire to accommodate us on all of these reasonable expectations. And if not, they should be required within the approval process. So I repeat in closing, minimum is a beginning and not an end. It is a valid position to apply in your consideration of this application, and in this instance, the waiver. Based on the content of this statement, I ask that you deny the applicant's request for a berm waiver. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. I've got them in order now. That will go back to Elizabeth Watts. Testify, you've been sworn in today, haven't you, already? Okay. Name and address so it hears it on the tape. Thank you.
Elizabeth Watson, 226 North Kent Street, Apartment B, Chestertown.
Go ahead.
I'm done what I could to separate out, but I think I've got a little bit of some of the planning. I'm just going to ask that you all deny it today. You know, this thing's going to happen at some point, and I think we need to pay attention to how well it's done so that it does survive. But you need to make specific findings in response to this partial burn waiver. So I'm going to suggest some key questions. The first is will the plan as presented with the waiver request conceal the view of the substation and the panels at full operational height? I believe that the single line of sight that they present in their plans is unrealistic. No driver turns their head completely perpendicular to the line of travel like this, okay? That's how they've given you any view into the site. So, you know, what we see is a full, you know, almost 180 view. I would question the analysis that suggests that the view of the site from the eastern end of the road will be obscured without the berm. Janet's presentation illustrates a diagonal line of sight that I think we all understand what that is, because when we come around the curve from the bridge and we pass the few houses there, and when you see that big open space, you see this height. The site actually is really hard to show in video and even in photos how dramatic that is in terms of the human experience of it, as opposed to how we're able to represent it, you know, visually. So just remember that it's pretty dramatic, that height. We've always wondered, you know, and I don't think that the analysis has shown us that they're going to be able to obscure that at all. The other is that the height of the solar panels will change with their operation. I don't know the range of their height, but you should understand that you're looking at, you know, panels that could be, 14 feet, I don't know. Technology's changed since the last time we really looked at how they were going to design those panels, so it's worth asking that question. The second is will the design of the plantings without the berms survive? So, you know, the survivability of what they are proposing is relevant to the berm waiver. And I would say that it's nice to try for the 100% native buffer. I've got a couple of comments about that. They have not chosen drought-tolerant species. Tupelo is a wetland species. It's also a slow-growing plant. Willow oak is also a wetlands plant. We see them on street trees because they've got nice small leaves, but they need a lot of water and they have very shallow roots. They would not be a good tree to put on the top of the berm if they do put up berms. And they are subject to wind throw in storms. And hackberry does not grow on the eastern shore except on top of shell meadows. Our soils are not sweet soils, and hackberry require that. So it's not a native species to the eastern shore. Eastern red cedar is fine for some use, but suggests for less reliance. And sumac, I go with John on that. So I think you've got to, there are other things that I could say about the plantings, but just thinking about what will survive and do well in this place, you know, from 2 years on. I subscribe to everything that people have said about the growth of these trees, but just thinking about how they're proposing to compensate for a lack of a berm. I don't believe that they've adequately presented that to you. So those are my my third question, I'm sorry. Will the plan as presented provide sound occlusion of the substation? Okay, it's really hard to understand sound from plans and all of this. And the staff report, so I'm just thinking that a berm is going to be a better sound occlusion in that area across from the Tuckers than simply trees, especially in the first few years. The renderings or the plans do not in any way show us the substation. So it's really hard to judge how tall will it be, you know, how's it going to be fenced, et cetera. It is behind the buffer, but we don't have any other way of judging that. And finally, the staff report, this goes back to the trees, the staff report shows that the current drawings are in conflict. Not all have been corrected to show 8-foot trees where they tell us in the beginning they're 8-foot trees. You have to go back into the drawings, so that's got to get fixed. So that's all of my testimony at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have to leave at 4:45, so if I can come back up, I will, but I'll send testimony. We are allowed to send testimony after this, correct?
If the
It'll be-
commission holds the record open for the submission
What-
of those
Okay.
items, that should be fine.
I meant before final, as I guess that it is, so. Is there anyone else in the audience, I've got names, if they didn't sign up to speak to the berms, please come forward.
Pat Langenfelder, Kennedyville.
Is testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, go ahead.
Driving down 291 quite often, going in and out of Chestertown, it's pretty obvious that with solar panels on that land, they need to be shielded, and I don't believe from the renderings we saw today that without berms that you would have a great screening done to prevent people from seeing the array constantly. I think that the waiver should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here, or there's someone online with an 804 number? Okay. Very good. Does the applicant want to summarize, and then we'll deliberate? Oh, go ahead.
There was someone in the audience who also asked about, can they submit testimony later? I understand that the record can be held open. Commissioners do that often, but that would assume you weren't making a decision today.
Yes.
So if you're making a decision today, then testimony after the.
Oh, I just meant, this is preliminary, that's the only reason I mentioned that.
You meant she could submit the testimony for the next
Right.
stage.
We're not
of the-
done today, is my point, and that, well taken, I'm sorry. And just, obviously, you guys know, berm questions, or berm summarization.
Sure, so just, I'll get things started and Nick can fill in here. Essentially, we had professionals at Kimley Horn, Nick and his team of professional engineers do these renderings, put together the line of sight analyses, and give us what that would look like. As you could see in those renderings, there was significant shielding. They've absolutely bolstered the landscaping plan in response to what was asked of the last meeting. In terms of the berm waiver, as you know, section 11D says that the berm requirement may be waived in part or total, and it gives the subject requirements minimum of 2 staggered rows of evergreen trees at installation that are at least 8 feet in height and planted no more than 10 feet apart. They showed you that. Interspecies shade trees have a minimum size at installation of 2.5-inch caliber. They showed you that. The understory trees with a minimum size at installation of 1.5-inch caliber or 6 feet in overall height. Again, that was part of the plan and the testimony that you heard from our experts. Shrubs with a minimum size at installation of 30 inches in height. Again, that was demonstrated. And the landscaping plan is deemed to screen elevations of the site adequately within 2 years. As you saw in those expert renderings, there was the screening, and I believe that it would be appropriate for the Planning Commission to give this partial waiver as requested. Nick can certainly speak more to the natural topography, the water drainage, and those sort of things that were brought up, and in regard to any concerns about screening with the changing topography of Martinet Road.
Sure, yeah. It's difficult covering the elevations as he goes down Morton Neck Road because they do change. So I think it's difficult to explain. Starting closest to the bridge along Morton Neck Road as you come into Chestertown. I think there was a picture of the gentleman standing on the side of the road. You could see a small shrub on the side of the road, him being 6 foot tall, and there was probably about the same height over his head before you would see the trees, which are on the total opposite side of the project. All the trees in that area are proposed to be 8 feet tall. They'd be well over his head, and we don't have a rendering necessarily from that specific position, but if you kind of use the scale in this picture, the first thing I thought was the trees would be right at the tree line on the total opposite side of the project, and it would block the view between the two of them. On the cross sections, if you have I'm assuming you got a copy of the one that we submitted. If it was a full-size one, it does help show that the site elevations, they don't go just straight up off of Morton Neck Road, they don't just go straight down off of Morton Neck Road. There's portions of the site that undulate, so the panels aren't all going to be above Morton Neck Road on this huge vista that you're just looking straight at panels the whole time. On the eastern portion of the site, it actually drops off back into the forested area that's going to be put into a forest conservation area. The center portion of the site, it too kind of ripples up and down. Even on the west side of the site where the hill is, there's portions of the site which are much lower than Morton Neck Road than the hill than when you get to the hill and then to the top of the hill. So we tried to put together the view shed kind of sections. The eye height, 3.5 feet, that's a standard eye height that you consider for DOT road design. So site distance analysis, if you're designing signs, if you're putting landscaping along a road, you want to make sure you don't block people's view shed. In this case, we use that 3.5 foot for reference to say we want to block people's view shed in this instance, whereas usually we're looking at it at the opposite to say we don't want to put anything in that because that's where people are looking and they should be able to see to drive safely. For the view shed renderings, they are conceptual in nature, and I think I meant to kind of cover it when we first started because in the last meeting that we were at, people thought it was AI design that did it. It is a model, and so the model, it uses the actual terrain surface. It is a 3D model that we developed. We put in solar panels at their full height, like kind of full tilt height, and that's what's modeled in the model. The substation was also included in the model. The substation, it just, from a perspective view being by the road, it's behind the trees and it's at the bottom of the hill, not the top of the hill. So, I'd have to look at the renderings that we did, but I know we dropped the substation in our model to represent the height of it. And so the view shed, I'd say kind of renderings that we prepared, I think, like Genevieve said, showed that we met the code requirements, that it would be screened within the 2 years. Those trees are taller than what we represented on the view shed sections. The view shed sections, kind of the cross sections with the green and showing an obstructed plant height. If you notice, we labeled those tree heights, that's at planting. So the views would be obstructed into the array at the 6 foot or 8 foot plant height plantings. The view shed renderings does consider growth over that first 2 years period of time. So I just wanted to clarify that because they were different between the view shed, kind of like the nicer colored renderings that we did, and the cross sections. The cross sections were done at planting, whereas the renderings were done after that 2 year growth period.
There was concern.
You got it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can he identify himself?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Jake Dixon, need address again?
Yeah.
No, the record just needs to reflect who's speaking.
I just wanted to point out that there was concern about the wiring leaving the substation being overhead and that was not modeled, but this, as required in the King County ordinance, all cabling leaving the substation will be underground or underneath the road. So that's what makes the substation a little bit shorter. You don't have the high rise overhead structures that are required for the dead end structures like the power lines. Hence why you're not seeing any power lines modeled because they're all under the ground.
And this is, Nick, the overhead lines along the road, the existing transmission lines, they're not gonna go anywhere. So those were included in the model, but yeah, they're not shown because they will be underground.
That may have less to do with the berms, but
How tall is the substation? Do we know?
So there's different components to the substation. Usually the substation kind of equipment itself, it's about 25 to 30 feet tall. And then there's kind of taller posts on the outside that are maybe 40, probably for one this size there. Sometimes they get up to 50 feet, but I would think they'd be smaller than that, for lightning protection. So the one literally right across the street, it would be, you know, similar, if not likely smaller than the one that's across the street.
And those are very small, like in thickness, like they're just literally lightning rods essentially, those tallest poles.
okay, thank you. It's up here. All we're going to vote on is whether we want to grant a waiver of berms as stated, partial waiver, I guess is the right, or not. And after that, we'll go on. Whatever happens there, we'll have to see how that goes, but then we'll handle the next question, because I do have questions about the substation, like I think other people do. What are people thinking?
Can I speak?
Sure.
First of all, there's nothing in our ordinance that says that utility-scale solar installations have to be invisible.
We don't have any
There's
rules on, we don't have any.
There's nothing in our regulations that says.
Don't allow them.
No, we do. We allow utility-scale solar installations.
Not in AZ, okay.
Okay. And there's nothing that says they have to be invisible. What the ordinance provides for is screening, what's called adequate screening, which isn't defined. So I want to make that point first. Second, from my perspective, the photographs that they've supplied of renderings create a more attractive view shed along Morg Neck Road than currently exists. Given the variety of plantings, the height of the plantings, the addition of trees to the landscape, the addition of flowering shrubs to the landscape, the addition of pollinator habitat to the landscape, all of which are important to our ecology and our environmental well-being. So those things, I think, are important considerations for this group. I can see questions about what kind of trees you plant or don't plant, and I'm sure these people are open to discussion about that. But I think we need to bear in mind that this project has been on the books, on the floor, for a long period of time. As Tom said last week, you know, the risk here of trying to thread the needle is that this goes back to the Planning Commission and gets out of our hands entirely, which is a possibility, I think. I think we need to be reasonable. I think we need to recognize how far these people have come in terms of responding to the concerns that have been voiced at this table. And I think we need to look to the future and the advantage of having this installation here in our county from an economic development, from a power security, from a power dependability perspective, and from an economic development perspective. As a sidebar, I attended an economic development class last week, intensive, had people from 3 countries across the country, and one of the things they said in terms of developers, site selection, people said, was that their first priority today isn't quality of life, isn't availability of housing or transportation, although those are important. It isn't workforce, which is important. It's the sufficiency and dependability of power service. Right now, in this county, we don't have it. And from my perspective as a resident and a member of this commission, I think it's time we paid attention to that.
Paul, the testimony appreciated, but we're not stopping this project.
No, I'm just putting an opinion.
This is a $100 million project.
I understand.
We're asking for what we believe the county deserves in adequate screening. The electricity generated here will not change your electric bill, will not change your electric use. Goes into the PJM grid. It has nothing to do, this is a bigger thing, and the state took that on, and that's wonderful if they do that. But we have a right here to decide whether we think berms are gonna make this county more attractive. I think the canard to say next door doesn't look as good, we want it to look better here. They're gonna put pollinator, they have to put these things in. It's whether they do them with a berm is what we're talking about now, and how much berm.
Well, I'll answer the berm question. In my experience, berms are as likely to result in early death of the plantings as not. I think the idea of staking plantings in this layout is good. I think these people are looking at a 3-foot berm across the majority of space down Mordnick Road.
That's just in the plan, they said 1,100.
Whatever.
1,100 to 5,000.
Okay. I don't see the need for a berm otherwise. That's my
Okay, that's what we're voting on, or any other discussion on the berm?
Nope.
Wait a minute.
Anybody down there? I don't want this table to get lopsided. I'm gonna take, one of the reasons why this project has lingered and taken so long is the fact that this property, none of it was ever zoned for solar. That's number one. This county and the town of Chestertown never said they were opposed to solar. They were opposed to solar on a site that was not zoned for it. We have thousands of acres or hundreds and hundreds of acres zoned for solar flat sites. This site is a tough site. It's a great site for solar. It's also a great site for residential development. And our ordinance does say you will screen that site adequately within 2 years. Now, if you choose to go out and take a site that has 40 or 50 foot of grade across the change, then you better be prepared to adequately screen that site within 2 years. I'm sitting here, if we're talking about just a substation that we don't know how tall it is, we're hearing 30, 40 feet. Well, now we're looking at a substation that is 80 feet higher than the road, the top of it. You're going to be tough screening that. I think, we keep talking about the berm along the road. We've got that equal number of plantings coming down between residences and adjoining properties. We're not even starting to discuss that. What aggravates or what exasperates me, let's say, is that when they don't want to berm, they only want to give the minimum tree height of 8 feet. But if I can see that site, when you come up from this bridge, I can see that whole field. I can see clear up there past the people that testified earlier where they live. I can see clear up here to the back of the center up there. You got to put I can't see why one isn't needed there, but there may be sections along that road that may not need it, but I can't believe that out of 5,000 some feet of road frontage that only 1,200 feet of it doesn't need a berm. And going up this property line over here, if you're not going to put a berm there, you're going to put significantly higher trees than 8 foot, because these people are looking straight down on it. And if I was getting a substation next to me up there, I'd be selling my house before that station went in there. But I don't want to hear about what's on the other side of the road. They were done prior to this zoning ordinance. The ones that have gone in there under the zoning ordinance are landscaped and screened. Del Marva just went through an hour-long meeting about it. And unfortunately, the only plantings that I can go out and look at are the ones that are around here, and they are, the only good one is on a piece of private property. The rest of them are terrible. And we asked at the last meeting, Paul asked, do you have a site around here that we can go look at where these plantings are? We haven't got them. So I have a tough time giving a waiver on all that berm away from there.
Thank you. Anyone else want to, how, do they want a berm or don't want a berm, deny a waiver, or what they've asked for was partial? Well, I'm going to reiterate what Bill said. I mean, I feel like the county's been, by the Public Service Commission, has said this is how we're going to do solar. But they did in that charge said you have the right to give the site plan. You have a right to do what you think's best in your county. We can disagree on the number of plantings and the height and all, but we deserve that. We asked for more last time and they gave a little more. But I believe the neighbors deserve some assistance, and it'd been nice to have a little more detail on the substation. But as probably everyone knows here, there's nobody in this room that drives that road more than I do. And the representation of those heights of trees that look lovely on the presentation will not be there in 2 years. They won't be there in 5 years. So I just don't believe they deserve a waiver. I think they should plan this with a berm.
I think I'd like to call the question.
Does anyone else have any? Ready for a motion? Okay. This is on the berm waiver. Go ahead.
I don't even know what to ask for here now.
They're requesting a waiver of the berm, a partial waiver, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't have a whole bunch of reasons. It's just, I move that we do this in a positive, I guess. I'll move that we approve their waiver for the berm. I'll make a motion that we approve their waiver.
So their plan is stated here, you approve that?
That, I'm not saying I approve it, I just would make the motion that the board consider the approval of the waiver.
Okay, so you request the waiver, waiver be approved, okay. Do we have a second?
Bill's a good.
I don't know what you were asking for. I feel like Bill.
I didn't quite hear that either.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you use the microphone?
I'm sorry? I make a motion that we approve the requested waiver for the berm that has been presented to us by the commission that's, what's the company? By the applicant, that's good enough.
Okay, requesting what we saw was approved, okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Ray?
Nay.
James?
Yes.
Sean?
No.
Paul?
No.
Bill?
No.
Paula?
Yes.
And I'll vote no. No. So that was, I think, 6-2.
Yes.
Okay. Or, no, I can't, 5-2. Someone add for me.
Motion fails.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so there's the denial request for partial berm removal. And I'll only ask the applicant, do we, and maybe some help here, what do we now review as far as the site plan? Just the substation, the overhead wires, the irrigation?
You choose to review the site plan and simply put conditions that require what you want to see added to it. I would like to say that you didn't, essentially you've just taken a non-action. When a motion fails, you've made no statement. So if you want to deny a waiver, you need to make an affirmative. I mean, it's okay what you did, but I'm just saying, if you didn't deny it, there was a failed motion, so you approved nothing. Because that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, I believe the rules require that we state the reason for denial.
Well, we didn't,
No, state the reasons for denial.
You did not deny the waiver. The motion failed. So you have not taken an action.
So we need a motion to deny the waiver, or if that's what the commission still wants.
I'll make a motion to deny the waiver for partial berm relief.
Okay. Second?
The motion needs to state the reasons.
Because it's felt that it will not provide adequate screening.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a positive, Ray?
Yay.
James?
I'm not all good.
Abstain? Sean?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Paul?
Nay.
And I'll vote with the affirmative, so it's 5-1, one abstention. Okay, now you've denied the waiver. Would you like to present testimony on other elements of that plan?
At this time, we ask that it be continued so that we can revise the preliminary site plan for approval at a later date.
Is that something we vote on?
May, yes.
So the applicant is asked to table, I guess, is what they're doing still? Is that,
It's a motion to postpone, really, but
Most-
they're
whatever.
essentially the same.
give us the right term? Does someone want to make that motion or not?
I make a motion that we grant
It's actually,
continuance.
I'm sorry, I misstated. It's not, it's a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw their site plan as submitted, if I understand you correctly. Yes. They're going to resubmit something different.
Oh, they're, so you'll resubmit, okay.
I make a motion that we allow Morgan X Solar LLC to resubmit their preliminary plan for a scale solar on a 245 acre system at 616 Morgan Neck Road, Chestertown, Maryland, in the 4th Electoral District, Kent County, Maryland.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Okay, so we'll grant it, come back again. Thank you for your patience.
Who seconded? I'm sorry, I couldn't tell.
I did.
Mr. Drady? Thank you. Gotta get my agenda now, I lost my agenda. Who's got an agenda somewhere here? Oh, that's last month's agenda. Here we go. We're up to staff reports. What? Oh, yeah, I know, I was gonna say more than, I was ready, I kept going, I'd ask for that, try family.
They print these packages out for us. That package was 165 pages. And when you went to pick it up, it was 88 pages.
They double-sided it.
I counted 44 pages, so it was 88 total.
You didn't get the whole package.
It was. You didn't get it printed out. I checked it online and plus. That's why I do on my computer today, so I couldn't.
Really? Because you couldn't get 770?
We didn't get all those renderings, we didn't get all.
No, I know.
And
Yes, we do.
what's it say?
Well, that's what this is here.
That's the landscape.
It says 731.
That's the buffer thing, that's not the plan, that's not.
Overall site plan.
Staggered berms. And again, that's why he said that it shouldn't affect the drainage.
Excuse me, staff,
This is 619.
let's quiet, let's get staff reports.
We're just conferring.
Excuse me in the back, thank you. Thank you, Bill.
We're just conferring. I don't think we have any staff reports to report. The TAC yesterday, we're still putting together the agenda, but there will certainly be items on your agenda in September, so there are.
Does it look, I mean, not the who they are, is it a full agenda or?
Yes, we do. This is
Okay,
7:30.
excuse me, the staff is
This
reporting.
planting plan.
Excuse me. Hold on, let's let
Okay, sorry.
staff. No other reports? Rob?
Just want to let you know there will be a September meeting when we do have items.
Okay,
I think it is going to be a pretty full agenda.
okay. Very good. Lisa, thank you for your help, and you're keeping us tidied up. I hope we'll do a better job of
No, you did,
noting.
you did fine, you made beautiful motions.
I know.
It would, no, I'm sorry if I went off in a different
No,
direction. than you
never,
wanted.
no, we need the council, so especially me, but, so we appreciate your advice, and we'll do a better job of noting. And I understand, I think Bill reiterated that earlier, that we, that, of course, cases that are applicants that go further out of our system, that it's very important that we note things better, or, so
It
we're,
was simply a matter of the fact that I knew that there was gonna be opposition in a case like that, it's
you're right.
more important.
Thank you for that. And welcome to
A question of
Thank you for allowing me to
procedure, if I may. And again, Bill does a wonderful job of those big, long motions, particularly since how all the staff reports, which have most of that information in there, are read into the record.
Yes,
Is that required? Because the rest of us aren't going to do that.
it's better practice.
Okay.
It's better practice,
So that is appreciated from a legal standpoint, it's the right thing to do.
Yes,
Okay.
especially if there's gonna be an appeal. If you've got an applicant here and there's no opposition, and you understand that it's, it's gonna be whatever you recommend to the BZA or whatever decision you make depending on the nature of the application that's before you, and it's not as important. But I can see the way that this might be going, and so,
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out, at what point is that,
your motion was fine, because all you need is
Yeah, it was a very
reason,
simple little
right?
question. It
Yeah,
was-
that was black and
but
white. That was
when
actually
you-
black and white, actually.
Yeah,
You need to make a finding on all of the reasons why, right?
Okay.
But a denial would be sufficient for any reason, the motion was sufficient.
so I need to brush up, so Bill's gonna get worn out.
Yeah.
All right.
Anything else here from commission
You end up
members?
doing most of them, yeah.
If nothing, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So did we get
Second.
a preliminary plan? Was that actually produced? For our review?
I never got one.
Yes, so my understanding is the agenda you see up there, is preliminary,
That's just a
agenda.
typo on the agenda.
There was a typo on the printed agenda, but the agenda online, it is a preliminary review, we're doing preliminary.
No, but did we get that site plan?
Yes.
Yes, everything was online.
It may be
We
I
printed
tell you,
the
I
bridge
turned-
packet, the printed, the paper items that you received were bridged, but all of the documents are on the days.
But honestly, I went over to Dover the other night and bought a brand-new computer because I said it spoils for hours. I mean, 8 hours spoiling that packet to print it out. So I went and bought a brand-new one. Not a thing on it, but that thing up in the cloud. And it took 4 hours to spoil it to print it.
So you should have, if you had come in to get the packet, you should have gotten an 11 by 17 set of the supplemental materials that were submitted. The 11 by 17 set had been from the previous meeting, didn't change.
Yeah, but are we supposed to keep those from the previous meeting?
I think in this instance, yes.
Well,
You
somebody
knew
ought to
that you-
tell us.
You knew the application had been tabled.
But then you say keep those plans.
Yeah, I agree. I did keep it, but I didn't, since I was looking at this, but I should have brought them. but-
Throw it away.
Yeah.
Grace, I got a room full of paper.
All right, good point. Anyone else we're gonna,
I'm gonna,
oh, go ahead.
I was not present at the last meeting, and considering this is gonna come up again, could I get last
Yes.
month's package? Thank you. Because they're, you know, I'm still gonna be behind.
Yeah, now they're gonna.
You're correct. Maybe none of that's relevant.
Motion to